I opened my eyes and looked around, feeling completely lost. Everything was unfamiliar. I was trapped in a cramped, circular space that felt incredibly tight. Moving even an inch was a struggle. The walls around me were soft and spongy, like I was buried deep inside a giant marshmallow. I looked down at my own body and froze. My hands were tiny. I had 5 little fingers, each barely a centimeter long. My heart skipped a beat as the realization hit me like a lightning bolt. I was a baby. More specifically, I was still inside a womb. I wasn't from this world. I used to live on Earth, but a tired truck driver had ruined that for me. One wrong turn of his steering wheel while I was crossing the street, and my life ended. Now, I had somehow reincarnated. It was absurd, but it was happening. I looked around like a curious toddler, though technically, I was even younger than that. Below me, I saw a long, pitch-black cord. It radiated a chilling, terrifying energy. Strangely, I wasn't scared of it. Instead, I felt a deep sense of connection to it. Wait, was that my umbilical cord? I stared at the thing, completely baffled. Why was it so dark? It looked like a piece of the midnight sky. I might not know much about childbirth, but I knew for a fact that umbilical cords weren't supposed to be jet black. As I was processing this, a cold, mechanical voice rang out in my head. Ding! Universal lottery system is activating. 3, 2, 1. Activation successful. Congratulations, host, on receiving a newbie gift pack. Would you like to claim it? A system? The ultimate cheat code for every traveler? I didn't hesitate for a second. Claim it, I shouted in my mind. Ding! Congratulations, host, you have received 20 lottery draws. I asked the system how it worked. It explained that I could use 1 draw for a standard prize, or trade 10 draws for a single super draw, which guaranteed much higher quality items. Plus, I would get 1 free draw every single day. The prizes were ranked by color: white, green, blue, purple, red, and gold. This was perfect. I looked at my 20 draws and made a decision. System, give me 2 super draws. I wasn't going to waste my luck on 20 small prizes. I wanted the good stuff. Ding! Starting draws. 3, 2, 1. Congratulations. You have obtained a gold tier special constitution, the supreme god demon body. Congratulations. You have obtained a gold tier special talent, demonic path blessing. My tiny baby face lit up with a grin. 2 gold rewards back to back? This system was incredible. The supreme god demon body was a legendary physique, a mix of the strongest gods and demons. It held both holy purity and total destruction. The demonic path blessing was even crazier. It would increase my cultivation speed by 10 times whenever I practiced demonic arts. Would you like to merge these now? The system asked. Do it. A wave of warmth flooded my tiny limbs. It felt better than a full-body massage. It was so relaxing I wanted to moan out loud, but since I couldn't talk yet, I just drifted in the bliss of the energy flowing through me. Outside the womb, things were not so peaceful. My mother, Xianlingyue, felt a sudden, violent shift in her stomach. She clutched her belly and let out a pained cry. Her maid, Ruer, rushed to her side, her face pale with worry. This wasn't just any pregnancy. Xianlingyue was carrying the firstborn son of Chun Tiandao, the head of the Chun family and the ruler of the 9 heavens demon realm. If anything happened to this baby, heads would roll. Madam, what's wrong? Ruer cried out. Xianlingyue was drenched in sweat, her demonic energy swirling uncontrollably around her. I think it's time. The baby is coming. Ruer panicked and barked orders at the other servants to find the midwives immediately. As the girls scrambled toward the door, a man in a black robe burst into the room. He was handsome, but his face was twisted with anxiety. The servants froze and cried, "Greetings, Lord Warden." This was Chun Tiandao, the most feared man in the demonic path. He looked at the trembling maids and snapped, "Why are you standing there like idiots? Forget the formalities. Get the midwives now. If anything happens to my wife, you're all dead." The maids didn't wait for a second warning. They bolted out of the room at full speed. Chun Tiandao rushed to the bedside and took Xianlingyue's hand. The terrifying demon lord was gone, replaced by a worried husband. "Yuer, I'm here. Everything is going to be okay." Xianlingyue bit her lip, nodding through the pain. A few minutes later, an old midwife, nearly 200 years old, hurried in. "Lord Warden," she said cautiously, "it is time. Please, you must step outside." Chen Tiandao gave a stiff nod and retreated, his heart racing as the most powerful man in the demon realm waited for his son to enter the world. I looked at Xian Lingyue, my heart heavy with a worry I couldn't hide. I leaned down and whispered into her ear, promising her that I'd be right outside the door, guarding her until it was over. She nodded weakly, her eyes filled with trust. I forced myself to stand up, but before I left, I turned to the old midwife. My voice was cold and steady, even though I was shaking inside. I told her plainly that if anything went wrong, if it came down to a choice, she was to save my wife. The child could be replaced, but Lingyue was my life. Of course, I promised her a massive reward if both survived. In the world of cultivation, the stronger you are, the harder it is to conceive. As a Saint King, the odds of me having a child were nearly zero. Yet, facing that choice, I didn't hesitate for a second. I chose Lingyue. Inside her womb, Chen Yin, was absolutely stunned. I couldn't believe my ears. Was this really my father? I hadn't even been born yet, and he was already talking about letting me go if things got tough. I started to worry I might be snuffed out before I ever saw the light of day. The midwife bowed, promising she understood. I didn't waste another second and stepped out of the hall. As the heavy doors slowly creaked shut, I watched through the narrowing gap, my chest tight with anxiety. Outside, the entire Qin estate was on high alert. Heavily armed guards blocked every entrance. We were the rulers of the Nine Heavens demon realm, and today, the world stood still. Suddenly, dozens of figures streaked across the sky, landing in front of the hall. These were the 36 elders of the Qin family. Every single one of them was at the peak of the Emperor realm, and some had even stepped into the Saint realm. In a world where cultivation ranks from Qi refining all the way up to Saint King, a force like this could make the entire 3,000 realms tremble with fear. I nodded to them as they bowed. The first elder, Chun Tianan, stepped forward. He spoke calmly about how he had just wiped out a rival sect in the Middle Realms to secure a treasure for my son's birth, the God-breaking bow. To him, destroying an entire territory was as simple as flicking away a speck of dust. Then the second elder stepped up, pulling a glowing, 5-colored stone from his storage ring. It was an ancient 5-color stone, meant to boost mental power. He admitted he'd had to wrestle it away from a famous young genius. One by one, the other 34 elders presented their gifts. None of these treasures had been acquired legally. We were demonic cultivators, after all. Killing and looting were just part of the job. I thanked them, but my mind was still on the woman behind those doors. Just as the tension reached its peak, a massive wave of demonic energy surged from the clouds. A black crane spiraled down, and a young man in purple robes jumped off before it even landed. It was my younger brother, Chen Tianyin. He was a genius in his own right, already in the saint realm at a young age, and he followed my every word without question. Seeing him brought a small smile to my face. I patted his shoulder, telling him he made it just in time. He grinned and pulled a massive, glowing egg from his ring. He told me he'd stolen a 7-colored phoenix egg from the Phoenix clan as a gift for his nephew. The elders gasped, their eyes nearly popping out of their heads. The Phoenix clan were descendants of ancient gods and ruled one of the top 10 realms. Stealing a 7-colored egg, which would likely hatch into a future ruler, was basically a declaration of war. My brother just laughed it off, saying he'd heard the Phoenix Lord had laid it a century ago and thought it would make a cool mount for my kid. But our conversation was cut short. The hall doors flew open, and a maid stumbled out, drenched in sweat and looking terrified. She cried out that the madam was having a difficult labor. The air instantly turned cold. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. Lingyue and I had been married for over 300 years. She was everything to me. Before I could even react, a massive thunderclap shook the world. The bright sky turned pitch black in an instant, thick clouds swirling like the end of days. We all looked up. In the middle of the darkness, a massive black lotus appeared, dripping with terrifying demonic energy. The first elder's voice trembled as he recognized it. It was the 9-grade black lotus, a legendary holy relic of the demonic path that was supposed to belong to the ancient demon ancestor, Luo Ho. Then, Chun Tianyin pointed toward the sky, his voice cracking. He shouted for me to look at the top of the lotus. Sitting right there in the center of the black petals was a dark, hooded figure. I stood there, parched and breathless. It was a saint-grade vision, the blessing of the demon ancestor. I stood there, staring at the sky in total disbelief. When a true genius is born into this world, the heavens always react with a vision. When I was born, a demon dragon had soared through the clouds. That was a top-grade vision, a sign of power that allowed me to conquer 3,000 realms and elevate the 9 heavens demon realm to its peak. But visions have a strict hierarchy. They range from low to top grade, and then there is the legendary saint grade. My unborn child was currently triggering the blessing of the demon ancestor. It was a saint-grade vision, the kind of thing people only read about in ancient myths. The elders were losing their minds, shouting that this was the greatest blessing our family had ever seen. They claimed my son would grow up to be invincible. But as they celebrated, my brother Chun Tianyin gasped. His face went pale, his eyes bulging as he pointed toward the horizon. The sky was literally splitting in half. One side remained pitch black, swirling with the demonic energy of the ancestors' blessing. But the other side turned a blinding, holy white. It was the divine grace of the gods. This was impossible. These two visions were both saint-grade, but they were complete opposites. They shouldn't be able to exist in the same space, let alone for the same person. The sight was so overwhelming it felt like the world was ending. Right at that moment, a sharp cry echoed from the inner hall. The doors flew open and the midwife ran out, her face covered in sweat and joy. She shouted that the madam had given birth to a son. Both mother and child were safe. I felt the tension leave my body in an instant. I didn't care about the visions or the legends. I just wanted to see my family. I told the first elder to reward everyone in the household, especially the midwife. I was going to make sure she never had to work another day in her life. I rushed into the room and went straight to Xian Lingyue's bedside. She looked exhausted, her face pale, but she gave me a weak smile. I held her hand and told her she had done an incredible job. Then, I looked at our son. He was lying there quietly, looking back at us with eyes that seemed far too intelligent for a newborn. Lingyue asked me to give him a name. I stood up and paced the room, my heart racing. This boy was the future of the 9 heavens demon realm. His name had to be perfect. Suddenly, 2 words flashed through my mind. I looked at my wife and asked her what she thought of the name Chun Yin. She whispered the name to herself a few times and nodded, her eyes full of love. We looked down at our boy and told him that from now on, he was Chun Yin. To anyone else, I was the most feared demon in the 3,000 realms. But in that moment, I was just a father. My son didn't cry. He stayed perfectly still in my arms, watching everything with curiosity. It was almost as if he understood that he was starting a new life with a powerful background and a mysterious system. My brother and the elders couldn't wait any longer and burst into the room. Tianyin was already trying to poke the baby's cheeks, promising to give him that phoenix egg as a mount. The 30 elders crowded around, pulling out glowing treasures and ancient weapons as gifts. The room was filled with so much spiritual light, it was blinding. But then, the first elder, Chun Tianyin, stopped smiling. He leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing as he examined my son. I asked him what was wrong. He told me about a legend he had read in the secret archives of our clan. It was a physique that hadn't appeared in the lower realms for eons. He called it the supreme god-demon body. It was the result of a perfect union between divine and demonic blood. Half god, half demon. It was ranked in the top 3 of all known physiques in history. The room went silent. If my son really possessed that body, he wouldn't just follow in my footsteps. He would surpass me and eventually rule over everything. But that kind of talent brought a target. I felt my demonic energy surge, chilling the air in the room. I looked at every elder and my brother. I gave a direct order. No one was allowed to speak a word about my son's physique to the outside world. If even a whisper leaked out, I would kill whoever was responsible. They all bowed, knowing the weight of the secret. My son was a miracle, and I would destroy anyone who tried to take him from me. As elders of the Qin family, their lives and fortunes were tied directly to ours. They knew that if the family prospered, they prospered. They weren't fools. But just as the room settled into a tense silence, a piercing, shrill cry tore through the air. A massive roar of anger erupted above the Chen family estate. "Chen Tianyin, you shameless thief! Give me back my egg!" Inside the hall, everyone's brows furrowed. I held my son, Chen Yin, firmly in my arms and walked toward the exit. Tianyin followed close behind me, looking a bit sheepish, with the 36 elders trailing us like a silent army. I looked up. The sky was dominated by the massive, glowing form of Feng Jiahuang, the lord of the Imperial Jade Realm. Behind him, hundreds of phoenixes circled the air, their bodies wreathed in roaring flames. The afternoon sky, which had been growing dim, was now dyed a brilliant, violent crimson. The sight was breathtaking, but deadly. The moment Feng Jiahuang saw Tianyin step out, his killing intent boiled over. He looked down at us with eyes full of burning rage. "Chen Tianyin, return my child's egg this instant. If you don't, I will mobilize the entire strength of the Imperial Jade Realm to wipe you off the map." It wasn't easy for a powerhouse at the Saint King level like Feng Jiahuang to produce an heir. The Phoenix bloodline was incredibly potent, making the birth of an egg a rare, once-in-10,000 years event. He had spent millennia nurturing that egg, only for Tianyin to snatch it the moment it was laid. Tianyin was a known troublemaker. He was the lord of the Nine Heavens demon realm and my younger brother, the sibling of the man who ruled the 3,000 realms of the demonic path. But Feng Jiahuang didn't care. Anyone who stole his child had to be prepared to die. Faced with the pressure, Tianyin cleared his throat and leaned toward me. "Brother, what do we do? I can't just take back the gift I gave my nephew, right?" Tianyin was talented, but he was only at the mid-stage of the Saint realm. Feng Jiahuang had been a Saint King for tens of thousands of years. They weren't even in the same league. In the entire Chen family, I was the only one who could look him in the eye. I remained calm. I was annoyed by my brother's stupidity, but I've always been the type to protect my family, regardless of who's right. Besides, they had brought the fight to my front door. That was a provocation I couldn't ignore. In just 600 years, I had risen from an ordinary man to a Saint King. My talent was legendary, and there wasn't a soul in the 3,000 realms who didn't fear me. A man like me doesn't take threats lightly. I looked up at the sky, my eyes narrowing into slits. Flying is forbidden above the Chen estate. I set that rule centuries ago. "Feng Jiahuang, are you trying to challenge me?" My voice was quiet, but it carried a crushing weight. With just a glance, the hundreds of phoenixes behind their lord began to tremble. The reputation of the #1 man of the demonic path wasn't just for show. Feng Jiahuang hesitated. He didn't actually want to be my enemy. He had been a Saint King long enough to sense that I wasn't a normal human. But his child was here. That egg represented the future of his race. A child with the potential to become a 9-colored phoenix and break through to the god realm. "Chen Tiandao," Feng Jiahuang hissed. "I know how strong you are. But your family stole my flesh and blood. If you don't return it, the Imperial Jade Realm will fight you to the bitter end." His eyes flashed with desperate killing intent. He was ready to risk everything. As one of the top 10 realms, their foundations were deep and terrifying. I let out a cold laugh. I looked at him with utter disdain. "To the bitter end? You think you have the right?" My voice echoed through the air. The next second, my demonic energy exploded. A dark, suffocating mist surged from my body with a thunderous boom. I kicked off the ground and soared into the sky. I stood face to face with Feng Jiahuang. Opposite me stood the elite of the Imperial Jade Realm, every single one of them at least at the Emperor Realm. In any other place, these were masters who could rule entire worlds. To me, they were just trash I could crush with a flick of my finger. "Feng Jiahuang," I said, my eyes turning pitch black with a hint of crimson light. "I told you, I hate people standing over my head. And I hate being threatened even more." The demonic energy swirled around the estate like a massive tidal wave. The Chun family disciples looked up in awe at the man who was their sky, their protector, the Lord of the 9 Heavens. The Imperial Jade experts felt a shiver run down their spines. Even Feng Jiahuang felt a knot of dread tighten in his chest. "Die!" Suddenly, dozens of black fireballs shot toward the phoenixes at blinding speed. These weren't normal flames. They were infused with a dark, destructive aura that felt like it could erase existence itself. The fireballs crossed the distance instantly, as if they were jumping through space. Boom. The sky erupted in a series of apocalyptic explosions. Feng Jiuhuang tried to block the attack, but he had underestimated me. The black flames didn't just burn, they eroded everything they touched. Even though phoenixes were masters of fire, this power made their blood run cold. Feng Jiuhuang managed to hold his ground, though he looked disheveled. His followers weren't so lucky. Several early-stage Emperor Phoenixes were turned to ash before they could even scream. Black fire continued to burn in the sky, a terrifying sight that left everyone breathless. The Imperial Jade experts stared in horror, their hearts pounding against their ribs. Even the proud Feng Jiuhuang started to think about retreating. That brief exchange told him everything he needed to know. My attack hadn't just been powerful, it had touched the laws of space. That was why they couldn't dodge. Space manipulation was a mysterious, terrifying power. The fact that I could use it so casually meant I was far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. I had to admit, Feng Jiuhuang was fast. But after that exchange, I saw the flicker of realization in his eyes. He knew my strength was above his. It was a bitter pill for him to swallow. I had only been on the path of cultivation for a few hundred years, while he, as a member of the Phoenix clan, had lived for over 30,000. To be outperformed by a human who was practically an infant in his eyes must have been soul-crushing. The arrogance drained from his face. He looked at me, his expression turning solemn. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "Chun Tiandao," he said, his voice no longer booming with threats. "I acknowledge your strength. But that phoenix egg is vital to my imperial realm. If you return it, I will give you anything of equal value in exchange. What do you say?" The change in his tone was pathetic. He went from a tyrant to a negotiator in seconds. He knew where he was. This was the Nine Heavens demon realm, my territory, and my power was an abyss he couldn't see the bottom of. I stood there with my hands behind my back, a faint smile playing on my lips. I looked at him, then glanced down at my son, Chen Yan. "Feng Jiuhuang," I said slowly. "I know your offspring is important to you. But if this egg stays by my son's side, it won't just be safe. It will be the greatest stroke of luck your Phoenix clan has ever had." Feng Jiuhuang looked confused. He followed my gaze to Chun Yan, who was resting quietly in Xian Lingyue's arms. My son didn't look afraid. Even with the Saint King Phoenix staring him down, he was calm. He knew his cheap, old man was stronger than anyone else here. Suddenly, Feng Jiuhuang froze. His eyes widened as he stared at Chun Yan. He looked back at me, his face pale and speechless. Is he a supreme god?" "Since you've recognized it," I interrupted, cutting him off before he could finish the name. "You should know what choice to make." He had seen it. Feng Jiuhuang had lived for tens of thousands of years. He was well-traveled and knowledgeable. He recognized Chun Yan's supreme god-demon body instantly. Even if he had never seen one in person, he knew it was ranked in the top 3 of all 3,000 known constitutions. The god attribute of that body was like a divine tonic to the Phoenix clan. It drew them in. Even the phoenix egg on the ground was wobbling, trying its best to roll closer to my son. To a phoenix, that aura was irresistible. Feng Jiuhuang fell into deep thought. He was calculating, fast. If he took the egg back today, the chances of it evolving from a 7-colored phoenix to a 9-colored phoenix were almost zero. But next to a supreme god-demon body, that was a different story. The sheer providence and the potential for evolution were reasons he couldn't ignore. He looked at the egg one last time with deep affection, then hardened his resolve. "Fine, I agree. From this day forward, my offspring will follow your son." The world seemed to stop. Everyone was stunned. The experts from the Imperial realm looked like they had been slapped. "Lord, you can't," one elder cried out. "The young lord is our future. How can we allow this?" "Exactly. We'll fight to the death. We won't let our prince become a servant." The elders of the Phoenix clan were shouting now, their pride wounded. They were one of the oldest clans in the 3,000 realms. They were willing to burn everything down rather than face this humiliation. Feng Jiuhuang didn't even look at them. They didn't understand the power of the supreme god-demon body. If that boy fully awakened, He would surpass me and dominate the entire 3,000 realms. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. Feng Jiuhuang flickered and transformed into his human form. For a Saint King, this was effortless. He appeared as a middle-aged woman with stunning, regal features. She wore a gold-trimmed phoenix robe and carried an aura of absolute authority. She looked at me and spoke clearly. From today, the Imperial Realm and the Nine Heavens Demon Realm are bound in a defensive alliance. We are allies. Let heaven and earth be my witness. As her voice fell, 3 cracks of thunder echoed through the sky. In this world, the heavenly Tao was real. An oath from a master of her level wasn't just words. If she broke it, the backlash would destroy her. The Imperial Realm experts were losing their minds. They couldn't believe their leader was being so submissive. Even I was a bit surprised. Feng Jiuhuang was decisive. She wasn't just giving up her child, she was hitching her entire realm to my wagon. She knew that being allied with a future god-demon was the ultimate investment. I nodded. I couldn't be the one to back down now. I looked up at the sky. I, Chen Tiandao, swear to form an alliance with the Imperial Realm. Let heaven and earth be my witness. More thunder shook the clouds. The pact was sealed. If word of this got out, the 3,000 realms would tremble. 2 of the strongest realms, one ancient and deep-rooted, the other a rising power under my command, were now one. Feng Jiuhuang took one last lingering look at the egg, then at Chen Yin. She reached into her robe and tossed a ring toward me. This spatial ring contains some treasures I've gathered over the years, she said. Consider it a meeting gift for your son. I caught the ring and swept it with my divine sense. My eyebrows shot up. The internal space was 3 million cubic meters, a small world in itself. It was packed. Spirit tools, weapons, ancient scrolls, mountains of gold and gems. The sheer scale of the Imperial Realm's wealth was staggering, and she hadn't even blinked while giving it away. I watched the Imperial Realm experts. They looked like they were losing their minds. They couldn't believe their proud leader was being this submissive. Even I was a bit surprised. Feng Jiuhuang was decisive. She wasn't just giving up her child, she was hitching her entire realm to my wagon. She knew that being allied with a future god-demon was the ultimate investment. I nodded at her. Rest assured, I said, my voice calm and steady. I will not mistreat your offspring. With my promise, the last of Feng Jiuhuang's worries seemed to vanish. A man of my standing didn't make empty threats or broken promises. In the 3,000 realms, my reputation was fearsome, but I had never gone back on my word. She knew she could trust me. Good, she said, nodding with satisfaction. She turned to her people. We returned to the Imperial Realm. The elders were confused, but no one dared to argue. They circulated their energy, their massive wings unfurling. In an instant, hundreds of phoenixes took to the sky, heading back toward their home. The sparks falling from their wings looked like a grand festival in the clouds. It was a beautiful sight, but the meaning behind it was even better. I had turned a war into a victory without losing a single man. My clan members were ecstatic. Their spirits soared as they watched the Imperial Realm retreat. The Lord is invincible, they cheered, their voices echoing through the valley. In the Qin family, we were known as the leaders of the demonic path, but we weren't a den of backstabbers. Our hearts were more united than those hypocritical, righteous sects. And I was the pillar that held them all together. I was the reason the Qin family stood at the peak of the realms. I descended slowly and landed next to my son, Chen Yin. I looked at him, a small smile tugging at my lips. From this day forward, I announced, Chen Yin is the Tao Lord of the Qin family. I looked at the elders. I will take him into the ancestral grounds for a period of secluded cultivation. Chen Tianyin and the Great Elder will handle the family's affairs. Also, not a word of today's events is to leave this place. Anyone who leaks this dies. I had to move fast. The ancestral grounds were rich with demonic energy, the perfect place for him to grow. But more importantly, I needed to hide him. The supreme god-demon body was too big of a target. If the monks of the Buddha realm, those hypocrites who preach morality while hiding daggers, found out about him, they would stop at nothing to kill him. It's easy to dodge a spear in the light, but hard to avoid an arrow in the dark. I had to keep him hidden until he was strong enough to protect himself. The elders bowed low. We obey your command. Time moves fast for cultivators. 6 years passed in the blink of an eye. During that time, the name Chun Yin vanished from the 3,000 realms. Even within our own clan, people rarely spoke of him. The younger disciples knew they had a young lord, but no one had seen his face. The elders kept their mouths shut about the day he was born, fearing my wrath. I spent most of those 6 years in the ancestral grounds with my son. I rarely showed my face to the world, but my legend only grew. I was still the man who had single-handedly turned the Chen family into a top-tier power. One morning, Chen Tianyin and the 36 elders gathered outside the ancestral gates. They stood solemnly, waiting. Suddenly, a thick, dark mist billowed from the entrance. A figure emerged slowly. It was a young boy, maybe 6 years old, but he carried himself with the gravity of a king. He was handsome, with long black hair flowing down his back and a cold, calm expression. He walked with his hands behind his back, but the ground reacted to his every movement. With every step he took, a black lotus bloomed beneath his feet. The aura coming off him was terrifying. The elders stared at the black lotuses, unable to even gauge the grade of the technique he was using. Step-by-step lotus growth. The great elder, Chen Tianan, gasped. The young lord has finished his seclusion. He looked closer, his eyes widening in shock. Wait, this aura. Is he already in the void-breaking stage? No, that's not right. The lotuses, this is the Wuxiang realm. The elders froze. The Wuxiang realm was the 5th major stage of cultivation. In our family, there were many experts at that level, but Chen Yin was only 6 years old. Reaching that stage at 6 was unheard of, a complete fairy tale. Most of these elders hadn't reached that level until they were in their 20s, even with all the resources in the world. Chen Yin didn't seem bothered by their shock. In 6 years, he had used his natural talent and a mysterious system he possessed to reach the peak of the Wuxiang realm. He was only one step away from the transcendent stage. As he reached the group, the great elder bowed deeply. I, Chen Tianan, greet the young lord. Behind him, the rest of the elders followed suit, their voices booming in unison. We greet the young lord. Chen Yin didn't flinch. He had grown used to his status as the son of the 9 heavens' greatest demon. He gave them a small, calm smile. Elders, you are too kind. Please rise. Thank you, young lord. My brother, Chen Tianyin, hurried over with a massive grin on his face. Nephew, you're finally out. Your uncle missed you to death. Tianyin had visited the ancestral grounds every month for the last 6 years. He didn't have a wife or kids of his own, so he treated Chen Yin like his own son. Of course, every time he visited, he would tell Chen Yin stories about treasures he'd stolen, people he'd killed, or which saintess he'd caught bathing. He was a terrible influence, and I usually kicked him out, but he had the skin of a rhinoceros and just kept coming back. Chen Yin's eyes lit up when he saw his uncle. Hey, uncle, next time there's something fun going on, don't forget me. Tianyin winked and slapped him on the shoulder. You bet. From now on, the two of us will run wild through the 3,000 realms. Saintesses, goddesses, we'll take them all down. Chen Yin chuckled. Take them all down. I like the sound of that. The elders watched them, faces twitching. These two were exactly the same. The great elder cleared his throat, trying to bring back some dignity to the situation. Young lord, did the master not come out with you? Chen Yin shook his head. My father had some insights during his cultivation. His bottleneck is loosening, so he plans to stay in seclusion for a while longer. I hadn't told them the real reason I was staying behind. Chen Yin had recently shared a 9-star demonic cultivation technique with me that he'd acquired. I wasn't about to let a gift like that go to waste. My son, Chen Yin, had lied to the elders, telling them he'd received that 9-star demonic cultivation technique in a dream. In reality, he had just handed it over to me like it was nothing. When I first saw the manual, my eyes nearly popped out of my head. You have to understand, a 9-star technique is the absolute pinnacle of power in the 3,000 realms. Even our prestigious Qin family only possessed 2, and one of those was an incomplete fragment. I couldn't wait to dive in. I needed to study every syllable, hoping to find the spark that would finally push my cultivation to the next level. The elders didn't suspect a thing. Hearing that I was on the verge of another breakthrough made them beam with pride. They knew that if I grew stronger, the entire Chun family's status would skyrocket. Make sure my father's seclusion isn't disturbed, Chun Yin said. His voice was calm, but it carried a sharp, murderous edge that made the elders shiver. They exchanged quick looks and nodded solemnly. They understood. This wasn't a request, it was an order. After chatting at the entrance of the ancestral grounds for a while, the elders escorted Chun Yin to his new quarters. The Chun estate was massive, housing tens of thousands of disciples, but Chun Yin's residence was located in the very heart of the inner palace. As he walked, he was flanked by my brother, Chun Tianyin, and all 36 elders. It was a sight that stopped people in their tracks. Thousands of disciples watched in absolute shock. These 36 elders and the second master were legendary figures throughout the 3,000 realms. Yet here they were, acting like a protective shield for a single teenager. If word of this got out, it would blow people's minds. It was unheard of. Within hours, the entire family was buzzing with rumors about the mysterious young lord. That night, Chun Yin sat cross-legged on his bed, lost in meditation. A soft knock came from the door. "Enter," he said. The wooden door creaked open, and Chun Tianyin stepped inside, wearing his usual grin. Chun Yin hopped off the bed to greet him. "Hey, nephew, you asked to see me tonight?" Tianyin asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. "What kind of tricks do you have up your sleeve?" Chun Yin smiled and looked his uncle up and down. "Uncle, you've been stuck at the middle stage of the Saint Realm for a long time, haven't you?" Tianyin's smile faltered slightly as he nodded. It was true. He was talented, but he hadn't progressed an inch in over 30 years. That jump from the middle stage to the late stage of the Saint Realm looked like a small step, but for him, it was a massive canyon he couldn't cross. He wasn't like me. He didn't have that once-in-a-generation, heaven-defying talent. That bottleneck was like a solid stone wall blocking his path. 35 years, Tianyin sighed. Not a single bit of progress since I broke through back then. Chun Yin's lips curled into a smirk. "Well, I have something that can help you fix that." Tianyin froze. He stared at Chun Yin with his mouth hanging open. If he didn't know that his nephew wasn't a liar, he would have thought the kid was playing a cruel joke. At his level, breaking through a sub-realm was harder than climbing to the heavens, even with the full backing of the Chun family's resources. "Don't mess with your uncle, kid," Tianyin muttered. In response, Chun Yin reached into his spatial ring and pulled out a golden fruit. It was a yellow apricot, glowing with a brilliant light and radiating an intense, pure spiritual energy. The moment it appeared, the air in the room felt 30% thicker with power. Tianyin stared at the fruit, his brain working a mile a minute. It looked familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. He could feel the raw power vibrating inside that tiny fruit. It was more spiritual energy than most people could imagine in a lifetime. "Nephew, what is this? You've heard of the 9-turn yellow apricot, right?" Chun Yin asked casually. Legend says when the 3,000 realms were born, a single tree rose in the east. It fruits once every 500,000 years, and each harvest only yields 9 apricots. Tianyin stood there, paralyzed. It clicked. He'd read about this in an ancient, dusty record hidden deep in the family archives. This was a legendary treasure that had been lost to time. Nobody had seen one in ages. His voice started to shake. "Holy, are you serious? This is actually it." He wasn't acting like a country bumpkin. He was acting like someone who knew exactly how dangerous this thing was. If the world found out Chun Yin had this, every Saint Realm expert would go feral trying to steal it. Even Saint Kings would kill for a single bite. "I promise to help you," Chun Yin laughed. "This should do the trick, right?" "Yes, more than enough." Tianyin reached out, his hand trembling, but then he suddenly stopped. He looked at Chun Yin's face and cleared his throat, pulling his hand back. "Actually, no, I can't take this." Chun Yin blinked, confused. "Why not? This is exactly what you need to break through." Usually, cultivators would kill their own kin for a chance like this. Seeing someone turn it down was unheard of. Tianyin dropped his playful act. He looked Chun Yin dead in the eye, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. "Nephew, this is a god-tier treasure. I need it. Yeah, but you need it more. If I break through, it doesn't change much for the Chin family. But you? With this kind of support, you'll go further than any of us." He took a deep breath, his voice thick with emotion. "Listen to me. The Chen family can survive without me. But we can't survive without you. You are our future. You are everything." He wanted that fruit. I could see the longing in his eyes. But his love for his family, and for my son, was stronger than his desire for power. Hearing those words, a rare wave of warmth washed over Chen Yin's heart. Chen Tiannin's eyes were slightly red. To the outside world, we were demons, cold-blooded killers who didn't blink at slaughter. But when it came to family, we had a primal instinct to protect our own. Facing a treasure that could change his life, his first thought was still my future. He was more honorable than any of those so-called righteous cultivators. I took a deep breath and smiled. "Uncle, just take the apricot. I have more." I wasn't lying. I had won 9 of these 9-turn yellow apricots from a system lottery draw. I had already given one to my father, Chen Tiandao, and another to my mother, Xian Linghua. I still had 6 left in my inventory. Besides, my current cultivation wasn't high enough to handle the energy. If I tried to eat one now, my body would simply explode from the sheer power. Chen Tianyin looked stunned. A god-tier treasure that others would die for, and I had spares. He didn't ask questions or doubt me. He just nodded, his hands shaking as he took the fruit. No one can stay calm when a breakthrough is within reach, and he was no exception. He left quickly, his fingers gripped tight around the apricot, his face glowing with excitement. I watched his back disappear and felt a wave of warmth. I turned back to my room and sat down in front of the phoenix egg resting by my bed. This was the child of Feng Jiehuang, the ruler of the Phoenix clan. It had been with me for 6 years now. It still hadn't hatched, but it had doubled in size and was covered in mysterious, ancient runes. I couldn't read them, but I felt a deep connection to the little guy. Whenever I practiced my cultivation, the egg would pulse with a sense of joy. I reached out and patted the shell. Then, I crossed my legs on the bed and called out in my mind, "System, show me my attributes." A screen appeared before my eyes. Host, Chen Yin. Cultivation, Wuxiang Realm Peak. Technique, 9-turn God Demon Art. Martial Arts, 9-star Nian Hua Finger, 9-star World Extinguishing Sword, 9-star Shadow Steps. Physique, Supreme God Demon Body. Supernatural Power, Shrink Earth 2 inches. Draws available, 50. I had reached the peak of the Wuxiang realm, the 5th major stage of cultivation. 1 major realm per year. If word of this got out, the geniuses of the outside world would have their hearts stop from shock. My techniques were even more ridiculous. In the 3,000 realms, techniques are ranked 1 to 9 stars. I had multiple 9-star skills. Any one of them could start a bloody war between the top sects. I looked at my 50 available draws. Usually, I would trade 10 normal draws for 1 super draw to guarantee something high quality. But today, I felt a hunch. "System, give me a 10 pull," I commanded. A massive wheel appeared in my vision, spinning so fast the icons blurred. Only I could see it. The notifications started popping up. Ding. Congratulations, you got a 1-star pair of fuzzy long johns. Ding. 2-star ice silk sleeves. Ding. 1-star broken cleaver. I stared at the screen, completely speechless. Fuzzy long johns. I was a demon cultivator, not a senior citizen. Who wears fuzzy pants to a battlefield? I was ready to call it a loss when the final chime rang out. Ding. Congratulations. You have obtained the supernatural power, law of speech. My eyes nearly popped out of my head. I was stunned. A supernatural power wasn't just a martial art. These were secret techniques rumored to come from the upper realms. A single supernatural power was worth more than 3 9-star martial arts combined. Nobody would ever trade one away. I already had one called Shrink Earth 2 inches. It was a spatial power that let me teleport 5 kilometers in the blink of an eye. It was the ultimate life-saving skill. But this new one, law of speech, was on a different level. 1 word to command reality. 1 word to lock down the world. According to the system, when I used it, my words would connect with the luck of heaven and earth. Within a certain space, I would be like the heavenly Tao itself. I wasn't the same clueless kid I was 6 years ago. I knew exactly how terrifying this was. In that space, I was the master. I was the ruler. Of course, there was a catch. If the enemy was significantly stronger than me, the effect would be weakened. But even with that limit, this was an invincible trump card. I looked at my status panel and smiled, feeling a surge of satisfaction. The power of the law of speech was terrifying, a true game changer. I glanced at the phoenix egg resting nearby and closed my eyes, beginning my cultivation. Tomorrow was the big day. In the Chin family, every child reached the age of 6 had to undergo a talent test. I had spent the last 6 years hidden away in the ancestral land. To the rest of the world, and even most of my clan, I was a ghost. A mystery. That was about to change. I wasn't just going to show up. I was going to make an entrance they would never forget. Morning arrived quickly. The Chun family martial arts arena was massive, and today, it was packed with hundreds of young disciples. These were the new generation, all 6 or 7 years old. Some were from the direct bloodline, others from the branch families. The Chun family was a titan, numbering in the tens of thousands. We had a strict system. If a branch disciple showed enough genius, their entire line could be promoted to the direct lineage. It kept everyone hungry. The branch disciples trained like their lives depended on it, and the direct heirs lived with a constant sense of crisis. It was a cycle of endless competition. In a world where the weak became ghosts, strength was the only currency that mattered. "Why hasn't it started yet?" a boy complained. "We've been waiting for an hour." "Exactly," another chimed in. "The officials are already here. What are we waiting for?" The kids were restless. At 6 years old, patience wasn't exactly their strong suit. I heard a rumor. A boy named Chun Dao whispered, looking around mysteriously. "There's a massive figure coming to join our test today." The kids around him leaned in, curious. Chun Dao's grandfather was the 6th elder, so he usually had the inside scoop. "Is that true?" someone asked. "Who could be so important that we all have to wait?" "I don't know the specifics," Chun Dao admitted. "My grandfather wouldn't say. He just told me to be on my best behavior." "This is ridiculous," a boy muttered. "No matter who it is, making the entire clan wait isn't fair." The grumbling grew louder. Complaints filled the air as the sun rose higher. Then, someone pointed at the sky and screamed, "Look, it's the second master and the elders." Everyone looked up. Dozens of figures were soaring through the clouds, heading straight for the arena. The crowd went dead silent. These weren't just any leaders. It was my uncle, Chun Tianin, accompanied by all 36 elders of the Chin family. In the 3,000 realms, these men were legends. Any one of them could wipe out a lower realm like it was a joke. But as they got closer, the disciples noticed something strange. The elders weren't leading the pack. They were flying behind a young boy. I flew through the air with my hands behind my back, calm and composed. I could feel thousands of eyes on me, filled with confusion and shock. Who was this kid? Why were the most powerful men in the family acting like his personal guard? We touched down on the main stage. "Young master," the great elder, Chen Tianan, said with a respectful bow. "This is the arena. This is where the test takes place. Please, take the high seat." His voice was humble, almost like a servant addressing a king. To him, I wasn't just a child. I was the future of the Chun family and the son of the overlord, Chen Tiandao. I looked at my uncle, Chen Tianin. "Uncle, you are my elder. You should take the seat." My uncle usually acted like a bit of a rogue, but he wasn't stupid. He knew today was about me establishing my authority. He gave me a wide grin. "Nyener, you are the young master. The future ruler. You sit in front. Your uncle will stay right behind you." I hesitated for a second, but then all 36 elders bowed in unison. "Please take your seat, young master." Their voices thundered, shaking the entire arena. I didn't argue further. I walked up to the highest throne and sat down, looking out over the crowd. The arena exploded into chaos. "Young master? He's the young master? Wait, I remember now. 6 years ago, the overlord had a son. They said he vanished the day he was born. Is that really him? The overlord's direct bloodline." The rumors started flying. They had all heard stories of the child whose birth triggered heavenly visions, but 6 years of silence had turned those stories into myths. Now, the myth was sitting right in front of them. "So that's the overlord's son," one boy whispered, his eyes narrowing. "Only he could make the elders act like that." I watched them. I could see the curiosity, but I also saw the skepticism. In the Chin family, respect wasn't given. It was earned through raw power. If I didn't prove myself today, they would only obey me because of my father's name, not because they feared me. The great elder, Chen Tianan, stepped forward. He was a peak Saint Realm expert, and his presence was suffocating. Silence, he barked. The word was infused with spiritual energy, hitting the crowd like a physical wave. The chatter died instantly. The kids looked terrified, suddenly remembering exactly who they were standing in front of. The test was about to begin. The entire martial arts arena fell dead silent. Old Kai, the great elder, looked out over the crowd. His voice was steady as he announced that today was the annual talent assessment for the Chen family. He didn't waste any time with long speeches. He opened a scroll and began calling names. First up, Chen Hao. A boy in plain clothes scrambled onto the stage. He was from a side branch of the family. For kids like him, today wasn't just a test. It was his one shot to change his destiny. If he showed high talent, the family would pour resources into him. I saw his fists clenched tight, his palms slick with sweat. He stepped up to a massive stone pillar. This wasn't just any rock. It was a rare treasure from the 3,000 realms designed to measure potential. Talent was ranked from 1 to 9 stars. 1 was the bottom of the barrel. 9 stars were so rare, they were practically myths. Less than 1,000 people in a population of billions had ever reached that level. Chen Hao closed his eyes and touched the stone. It began to glow. A faint white light flickered, then turned a deep, burning red. The light climbed higher and higher until it finally stopped. Chen Hao, 6-star talent. Above average, Chen Tianan announced. I saw the tension drain out of the boy's shoulders. He looked ecstatic. In the outside world, a 6-star talent was a genius that sex would kill to recruit. In the Chen family, it was just okay, but it was enough to guarantee him a future. He bowed deeply to the elders and practically floated off the stage. The other disciples watched him with a mix of envy and fear. This test was a threshold. If you were born with 1-star talent, no matter how hard you worked, you'd likely never even break past the basic Qi refinement stage. Next, Chen Su. The names kept coming. Chen Su, 5 stars. Average. Chen Mei, 4 stars. Below average. The moods on the field shifted with every result. Some kids looked like they wanted to cry, while others breathed sighs of relief. Then, the great elder called the next name. Chen Shui. The arena went silent again. All eyes turned toward a young girl walking forward. She was the granddaughter of the 3rd elder and a direct descendant. Rumor had it she was a natural-born prodigy. Even though she was only 6, the same age as me, she had already broken through the mortal shedding realm and stepped into the spirit-calming stage. Even the 3rd elder, sitting near me, looked nervous. She tried to hide it, but I could see her leaning forward in her seat. Chen Shui reached the pillar. Her face was pretty, but tight with focus. As soon as her hand touched the stone, it didn't just glow, it roared. A pillar of light shot upward, instantly passing 1, 2, then 5 stars. The sheer pressure of her spiritual energy whipped her hair around her face. 6 seconds later, the light exploded in a brilliant flash. Chen Shui, the great elder said, a rare smile tugging at his lips. 8-star talent. Superior. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. People were losing their minds. An 8-star talent meant she was officially in the top tier of the family's future powerhouses. If she didn't die young, she was guaranteed a seat as an elder one day. The 3rd elder couldn't stop grinning. The elders around her started showering her with praise, calling her granddaughter the future backbone of the Chen family. She soaked it all up, but then she turned to me. My granddaughter has a bit of talent, she said, her voice dripping with sudden humility. But she's nothing compared to the young master. She's about the same age as you. If you don't mind, she could be your maid. She can warm your bed, wash your clothes, whatever you need. I stared at her, completely stunned. The rest of the crowd looked like they'd been turned to stone. Who offers a top-tier genius as a maid? But I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly what she was doing. Maid was just a title. If Chen Shui stayed by my side, she'd have my ear. If I grew fond of her later, the 3rd elder's branch would be set for life. The other elders realized the play immediately. They looked at the 3rd elder like she was a cunning old fox, and then the chaos started. Young master, I just remembered I have a granddaughter who's 8. She's very handy with chores. It would be her honor to cook for you. Young master, my daughter is 12. She's a bit older, but she's developing very well. It turned into a bidding war. One elder was so desperate he didn't even have a daughter or granddaughter, so he actually tried to offer me his daughter-in-law. I sat there on the throne, breaking into a cold sweat. I wasn't some historical tyrant looking for a harem. I knew that if I accepted even one, I'd have 35 other angry elders trying to shove their relatives into my bedroom. My life was about to get very crowded. This was getting ridiculous. I cleared my throat, feeling the heat rise to my face. I appreciate the kindness, elders, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I think I'll pass on the maids for now. The disappointment in the room was palpable. They looked like I'd just crushed their dreams. I knew what they were thinking. I was only 6 years old, yet I was already a king realm cultivator. My talent was unheard of in the 3,000 realms. If I eventually broke through the void and became an emperor, anyone by my side would ride my coattails to the top. My second uncle, Chen Tianyin, saw me struggling and let out a laugh. He stepped in to save me from the hungry eyes of the elders. "All right, that's enough," he said, his voice commanding respect. "My nephew is the young master of the Chen family. He represents our entire clan's future. When he achieves great emperor status, you'll all benefit. There's no need to push these maids on him." As the second in command, my uncle's words carried weight. The elders grumbled, but eventually backed off. They knew he was right. My success was their success, whether their granddaughters were in my bed or not. Down at the training grounds, the talent testing was still underway. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the testing stone. My uncle and the elders all froze, their eyes snapping toward the stage. The light was intense. It was a deep, piercing purple that far outshone Chen Shui's previous display. People shielded their eyes, unable to look directly at it. The great elder, Chen Tanan, stood there with his jaw dropped. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling with excitement as he made the announcement. Chen Pingon, 9-star talent. Superior grade. The air in the arena seemed to freeze. A 9-star talent was one of the rarest things in the 3,000 realms. Even a powerhouse like the Chun family only produced a handful in a generation. These were the kind of geniuses that entire empires fought wars over. 9 stars. My God, he's hitting the big leagues now. He's going to be a first-tier candidate. The resources he'll get, it's insane. The crowd was buzzing with envy. Even Chen Shui, with her 8-star talent, looked at him with a mix of awe and frustration. That 1-star difference was a literal canyon between their futures. I leaned toward my uncle, my interest piqued. Who is he? What's his story? I was the young master. If I wanted to build a legacy, I needed loyal, powerful people under me. A 9-star talent was the perfect candidate. With enough resources, a kid like that would rise like a rocket. "I've heard of him," Uncle Tianyin whispered. "He's from a side branch of the family. His parents were killed in an ambush by the Crimson Flame Divine Dynasty when he was only 3. He's been an orphan ever since. He's known for being incredibly hardworking, but he's a loner. Doesn't talk much." I listened, my mind already spinning. I knew about the Crimson Flame Divine Dynasty. Centuries ago, before my father rose to power, they were the top dogs in the realms. They ruled the Crimson Flame Domain, one of the 10 great upper domains. Back then, our 9 Heavens Demon Realm was just a mid-tier territory. But then they ran into my father, Chen Tiandao. In just a few hundred years, he crushed them, took their status, and turned our home into a dominant upper domain. The Crimson Flame Dynasty had been bitter ever since, constantly plotting and picking fights at our borders. That's likely how Chen Pingon lost his parents. Uncle Tianyin smiled at me. "Interested? I can go down there right now and tell him he's your personal follower." With his background, he'd jump at the chance. I looked at Chen Pingon. He stood by the stone, his face cold and expressionless, despite the chaos around him. I shook my head. "No," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "I have my own way of doing things. A genius like that won't give you his soul just because you command it. I want him to follow me because he chooses to." My uncle laughed, clearly impressed by my confidence. "Fair enough. You've always been sharp." On stage, Chen Pingon pulled his hand away from the stone. I could see a flicker of emotion in his eyes, a spark of raw, burning ambition. He knew this changed everything. He bowed deeply to the great elder and walked back into the crowd. Every eye followed him, but he kept his head down, returning to the very back of the line. The great elder cleared his throat and looked at the next name on his list. He paused for a heartbeat, his voice booming across the field. Next, the young master of the Qin family, Chun Yen. The silence that followed was absolute. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Most of these people had never even seen me before today. So that's him? The Lord's son. I wonder if he's actually talented. Being the son of a legend doesn't guarantee anything. I bet he's nothing special. If he were a genius, wouldn't they have shown him off years ago? He's probably been hiding because his talent is trash. I heard the whispers. I felt the skepticism. They thought I was just a pampered prince living in my father's shadow. I stood up from my throne, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes on me. It was time to show them exactly who I was. Even though many people were skeptical, they couldn't help but stare. Curiosity burned in their eyes. They wanted to know exactly what kind of talent I possessed. I didn't hesitate. I stood up from my seat and walked slowly toward the testing pillar. Behind me, the elders and my uncle, Chun Tianyin, grew tense. I could feel their hearts racing, practically jumping into their throats. They knew I was special. After all, a 6-year-old at the Wuxiang realm was unheard of, but a formal test was different. It was the only objective way to prove my worth to the world. Every eye was fixed on me. I wasn't nervous at all. A small smile played on my lips, and my eyes shone with absolute confidence. I reached the pillar and placed my hand firmly against the cold stone. 1 breath passed. 2. The pillar didn't change. It stayed dark, motionless, without even a flicker of white light. The crowd froze. Then, the whispers started. No way. Is the young master talentless? That can't be right. But the testing pillar never lies. He must be a dud. No wonder they kept him hidden. It wasn't just the crowd. Even the elders looked confused. The stone remained dead. But just as the chatter reached a peak, someone in the crowd screamed, "Look, it's changing." Everyone's gaze snapped back. The elders leaned forward, their eyes sharp. Suddenly, the pillar exploded with light. It cycled through the colors at a blurring speed, from red all the way to purple in just 3 seconds. Purple meant 9-star talent. The elders were already half out of their seats, ready to cheer, when the purple light vanished. Then came the roar. A massive sound shook the ground as a 7-colored radiance erupted from the pillar. It wasn't just bright, it was blinding. It felt like a miniature sun had landed on the stage. People covered their eyes, unable to look directly at the glare. This light was 10 times more intense than the purple light Shin Pingon had triggered earlier. What is that? My eyes. 7 colors? I've never heard of such a thing. The brilliance lasted for 10 full breaths before finally fading. When the spots cleared from everyone's vision, I was still standing there. I looked calm, my expression unchanged. The silence was heavy. The great elder stood next to me, looking completely lost. He had lived for 1,000 years and had never seen anything so bizarre. 7 colors? How was he supposed to grade this? He cleared his throat, trying to find his voice. Talent, 10 stars. 10 stars. The crowd was stunned. That rank didn't even exist. The elders exchanged bewildered looks, but there was no other way to explain what we had just seen. I object. A voice cut through the confusion. A girl named Qin Shui stepped to the front of the crowd. Her grandfather, the 3rd elder, looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. He knew my secret. He knew about the divine omens at my birth, but Qin Shui didn't. The great elder frowned. What is your objection? Qin Shui bit her lip, her pride getting the better of her. She didn't want to offend me, but she hated the idea of a fixed test. She thought I was using my father's status to fake the results. The maximum talent is 9 stars, she said, her voice ringing out. This 7-colored light is unheard of in our records. I believe there's something wrong with the test. She was implying I had used some secret treasure or technique from my father to cheat. The crowd started nodding. They couldn't wrap their heads around a 10-star talent, so they chose to believe I was a fraud instead. The great elder was about to bark at her to sit down, but I held up a hand. I looked at her, my gaze steady and relaxed. Then how would you like me to prove it? I asked. Qin Shui didn't blink. Strength. A pillar can be manipulated, but raw power cannot. I nodded. It made sense. Strength was the only universal language in this world. I looked out at the rest of the disciples, that same smirk returning to my face. Is that what you all think? The crowd shifted uneasily for a moment. Then voices started rising in agreement. Yes, strength is the only proof. Show us what you've actually got. I laughed softly. Fine, if that's what it takes. My aura shifted instantly. The warmth disappeared, replaced by a cold, sharp pressure that rolled off the stage like a tidal wave. My eyes turned piercing. Anyone who isn't convinced, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the field, step up. It wasn't a shout. It was a simple, confident challenge. The sheer arrogance of it actually made some of them respect me more. I looked like my father's son in that moment, dominant and untouchable. Chen Shui was the first to move. She tapped her toes against the ground. Her dark energy flared, and she leaped onto the stage. She had 8-star talent, making her one of the top geniuses of the new generation. She wasn't afraid. Within seconds, a dozen more disciples followed her, landing on the stage with defiant looks in their eyes. In the Chun family, power was everything. And today, I was going to give them a lesson they'd never forget. It didn't matter that I was Chun Tiandao's son. In this world, if you didn't have the strength to back up your name, you would never earn real respect. I looked at the small group of challengers standing before me and let out a light laugh. Is that all? Anyone else? I asked. My voice was calm, almost airy, but it did the trick. A few more disciples exchanged looks and stepped onto the stage. Within moments, 22 people stood across from me. These were the elite of the Chun family's new generation. Most had 5-star talent, and 3 of them were 7-star geniuses. If they were trained well, they would become the backbone of our clan. I felt a surge of satisfaction. As the young patriarch, I wasn't afraid of people coming for my position. What I truly feared was a family with no future, a generation of weaklings who couldn't hold their own. Looking at these defiant faces, I knew the Chun family was far from declining. I scanned the crowd below and noticed Chen Pingan. He was still standing in the same spot, looking completely indifferent. I smirked. This guy wasn't just talented, he was incredibly cautious. The fact that he hadn't jumped onto the stage yet showed he had a much stronger mind than Chen Shui and the others. I needed a way to win him over, and this was the perfect opportunity. I wasn't going to let him stay on the sidelines. Chen Pingan, I called out, my eyes locking onto his. You're a 9-star talent. Don't tell me you have no thoughts on this. Or is the family's greatest genius actually a coward? I was baiting him, and I didn't care who knew it. The crowd immediately turned their heads toward him. They realized the top genius hadn't moved yet. Chen Pingan looked surprised for a split second, clearly not expecting me to call him out by name. He composed himself quickly. Before I even saw him move, his long sword had slid silently from its sheath. Since the young patriarch wishes to give me guidance, I won't be polite, he said. His aura tightened instantly. He took a single step, leaped into the air, and landed firmly on the stage. The crowd gasped. That move alone showed his power was anything but simple. Chen Pingan had spent his whole life hiding his true strength. He practiced hard but stayed low profile because his parents were dead, leaving him alone in the clan. He had to be careful to survive. But he was still a man of spirit. He was just as curious about my cultivation as I was about his. Since his 9-star talent was already public knowledge, he had nothing left to hide. Good. You've got spirit, I said, nodding in approval. That's a man of the Chen family. I stood there, perfectly relaxed, facing the group. Chen Shui stepped forward first, her white sword drawn and ready. She gave a formal cupped fist salute. Chen Shui is unskilled, but I wish to be the first to test the young patriarch's skills, she announced. I shook my head slightly. There's no need to make it so complicated. I gave them a thin smile. All of you, come at me together. The stage went silent. Everyone was stunned. They thought I was being incredibly arrogant. A gauntlet of one-on-one fights would have been unfair enough, but I wanted them all at once. These were the top disciples of the new generation. Most were in the mortal-shedding realm. Chen Shui was a spirit condensation warrior, and Chen Pingan was a total wildcard. Together, even a void-breaking realm expert wouldn't dare underestimate them. When they didn't move, I decided to give them a reason. I tightened my posture, and suddenly, a terrifying wave of demonic chi erupted from my body. It was an endless, crushing force that swept across the stage like a storm. Every disciple on the field felt a sudden, crushing weight. It wasn't just physical pressure. It was a primal fear bubbling up from the depths of their souls. Even the elders sitting on the high platform felt it. Chen Tianyin and the other Saint Realm experts stiffened. The young patriarch's aura. It makes me feel like I should submit, the fifth elder whispered. His pupils shrunk in shock. He was a mid-stage Saint Realm powerhouse. Yet here he was, feeling a tremor of fear because of a 6-year-old boy. It wasn't about raw power. It was a spiritual suppression so deep he felt like his knees might buckle. It was the same way a low-level beast felt in the presence of a divine bloodline. If I'm not mistaken, Chen Tianyin said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. That's the supreme god-demon body. The elders began to murmur excitedly. The legendary physique was the ultimate leader of the demonic path. Its bloodline power was peerless. With a young patriarch like this, the Chen family would reach the peak of the 3,000 realms within 1,000 years. Instead of being offended by the pressure, the elders were beaming. The stronger I was, the better their future looked. They watched me like I was the most precious treasure in existence. Down on the field, it was a different story. Some of the weaker disciples had already collapsed, their legs giving out from the sheer weight of my presence. The way they looked at me changed instantly. They realized I wasn't just a lucky kid. Chen Pingon tensed up, his eyes narrowing as he watched me. He was no longer just curious. He was on high alert. Even this aura makes me want to submit, Chen Pingon whispered to himself. I stood in the center of the field and offered a faint smile. I narrowed my eyes, looking at the crowd with total indifference. Come on, I said. Show me what you're actually worth. The disciples didn't waste any more time. They could all feel that something was different about me. Chen Shui was the first to move. She stepped forward, her white longsword piercing the air with a sharp whistle. 7 or 8 other Chen family disciples followed her lead, charging at me from all sides. They looked fierce, their faces twisted with the intent to tear me apart. To my eyes, this attack was a joke. It was like watching toddlers trying to scratch an adult. It didn't even stir a breeze in my heart. The corner of my mouth curled into a smirk. I opened my lips and let a single word drop. Scatter. Instantly, a massive wave of demonic energy erupted from my body. Before any of them could even touch me, the shockwave slammed into them. They were sent flying like ragdolls, crashing heavily onto the hard ground. The entire square went silent. Everyone froze. I hadn't moved a muscle. I hadn't raised a hand. With just one word, I had shattered their combined attack and leveled the field. What kind of move was that? Someone stammered. It defied everything they knew about combat. Up on the platform, the elders and Chen Tianyin were stunned. Chen Tianyin's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Could it be the legendary divine ability? He gasped. Follow my words. The elders stood there, paralyzed. One word to settle the world. One word to vanish 10,000 enemies. This was a power that had disappeared from the world hundreds of thousands of years ago. It only existed in the fragmented sentences of ancient, rotting scrolls. Yet here I was, a 6-year-old boy, using it as easily as breathing. Since the day I was born, I had given them one heart attack after another. The heavenly visions, the supreme god-demon body, the 7-colored talent, and now this. They knew I wasn't a normal child. But despite my terrifying potential, none of them dared to harbor any evil thoughts. They knew my father, Chen Tiandao, was a madman who could take on the entire 3,000 realms alone. Besides, the stronger I was, the brighter the family's future became. They weren't fools. On the ground, Chen Shui clutched her chest, groaning in pain. She gritted her teeth and forced herself to stand up. Below the stage, the other disciples looked at me with eyes full of awe and terror. Humans always fear the unknown, and to them, I was becoming something closer to a god or a demon than a human. Chen Pingon grew cautious. He had never heard of a technique like mine. He looked at me with a new, heavy expression. What's wrong? Why stop now? I asked, looking at the hesitant crowd. My gaze shifted directly to Chen Pingon. Pingon, show me how great a 9-star talent really is. Out of everyone here, I was most interested in him. He had talent and a solid character. I wanted him under my command. But a genius like him wouldn't be won over by status or family background alone. Even if he bowed his head, his heart would remain rebellious. The only way to handle someone like him was to crush him. I had to show him the unbridgeable gap between us. My provocative tone worked. Shin Pingan's pride flared up. He didn't understand my tricks, but he wasn't a coward. He drew a pitch-black longblade. It was a simple 4-star weapon left behind by his deceased parents, but to him, it was his faith. In that case, I won't hold back, Shin Pingan said, stepping forward. Young patriarch, be careful. He moved like a wild beast, circling me, his eyes searching for the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly, he saw a flaw. A flash of joy crossed his eyes. He didn't hesitate. He lunged, his blade erupting with terrifying demonic energy. He was fast, so fast that the other disciples could only see a blur of afterimages. He's fast, one elder noted. He's already touching the threshold of the void-shattering realm. A 6-year-old at the peak of the spirit concentration realm, another added, impressed. He's easily in the top 5 of our tens of thousands of disciples. Blood demon slash. Shin Pingan roared. He swung the blade, and the air filled with the metallic scent of blood. It was a 3-star martial art, the strongest one he possessed as a branch member with no resources. As the blade drew inches from my skin, Shin Pingan's smile widened. He was convinced my earlier move was just some protective treasure my father had given me, a mere illusion. Then, there was a loud bang. The sound of metal hitting stone echoed across the stage. Shin Pingan's smile vanished instantly. His blade struck the floor tiles where I had been standing a millisecond before. How? Where did he go? He gasped. Before he could process it, a massive force slammed into his back. The impact was total. He went airborne and crashed face-first into the dirt. Shin Pingan spat a mouthful of blood and snapped his head up. I looked down at him and smiled. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and dawning realization. That flaw he thought he saw earlier? It was a lie. I had dangled it in front of him like bait for a hungry fish. He was so confident in his own speed that he didn't even stop to think. He just lunged, and now he was paying the price. He groaned, clutching his back as he forced himself to stand. His grip on his long blade tightened until his knuckles turned white. He wasn't looking at me like a spoiled young master anymore. He looked at me like I was a monster. I could see the gears turning in his head. He realized I had been playing the part of a pig to eat the tiger. My speed and power were beyond anything he could have imagined. But what he didn't know was that I had held back. If I had used my full strength, he wouldn't be standing. He would be a corpse. I started walking toward him, my steps slow and deliberate. Blood demon slash, I said, my voice calm as I critiqued him. A 3-star martial art of our Chin family. It uses the blood-red killing intent of the body to fuel the blade. It's a shame, really. You've mastered the form, but you haven't touched the intent. I stopped a few paces away. The crowd watched, held in a suffocating silence, wondering what I would do next. I flicked my wrist, and a standard steel blade appeared in my hand. It was a common weapon, nothing special. Then, I let my energy flare. A massive cloud of blood-red mist erupted, covering the entire stage. A chilling, murderous aura filled the air, thick enough to make the disciples in the stands feel like the world was ending. Their hearts hammered against their ribs. They felt an instinctive, primal fear. Shin Pingan, standing right in front of me, turned pale. He tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. I moved. My blade was a blur, a streak of crimson light cutting through the mist. Blood demon slash. A deafening roar shook the grounds. The impact was like a mountain collapsing. When the dust and red mist cleared, the crowd gasped in unison. A massive crater, 7 or 8 meters deep, sat right in the center of the stage. Fumes of demonic energy swirled around the jagged edges of the pit. Shin Pingan trembled. He was the closest to the blast, and he could feel the sheer depth of the power I had unleashed. The stage wasn't made of ordinary stone. These were green jade tiles, some of the toughest materials in the 3,000 realms. When he had struck the floor earlier, he had barely left a faint white scratch. But I had turned the solid jade into a hollowed-out abyss. He was at the peak of the spirit concentration realm, a genius by any standard. He had worked hard, hiding his talent and tempering his skills for years. But facing me, he felt completely helpless. It wasn't just the gap in our cultivation levels. It was the absolute mastery of the technique itself. His throat felt dry, his voice raspy. He couldn't find a single word to say. I saw the utter devastation in his eyes and knew I had achieved my goal. I let a small smile play on my lips. Like I said, the technique is only 3 stars, but your understanding is too shallow, I told him. You're still a long way off, kid. I sounded like an old master giving a lecture to a stubborn student. Even though we were close in age, no one in the crowd dared to laugh. The power I had just shown earned me the right to speak however I wanted. Chen Pingon lowered his head, his shoulders slumping. He repeated my words under his breath, his fighting spirit completely broken. He knew there was no point in continuing. Trying to fight me was like a firefly trying to outshine the moon. The gap was too wide to bridge in a single lifetime. He took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. The young patriarch's strength is far beyond mine, he announced, his voice carrying across the field. I admit defeat. A collective gasp rippled through the training grounds. The disciples were stunned. Chen Pingon, the 9-star talent, the peak-level genius, had surrendered without a second thought. They realized that throughout the entire fight, I hadn't even broken a sweat. I wasn't just fighting him, I was teaching him. The elders on the observation deck exchanged glances, their faces a mask of confusion and awe. That single strike hadn't just shattered the stage, it had shattered their perception of who I was. The useless heir was gone. In his place stood someone terrifying. One by one, the other challengers stepped back. I surrender, one shouted. Me too. The young patriarch is on another level. Soon, the entire arena was filled with the sound of voices yielding. The defiance was gone, replaced by a sudden, deep-seated respect. I stood in the center of the wreckage, the undisputed master of the stage. The fighting spirit drained out of the Chun family disciples. One by one, they bowed deeply toward me. Even Qin Shui, who had been so defiant before, lowered her proud head. I saw the spark of genuine respect in her eyes. This was the Chun family tradition. The strong were always honored, no matter what. Before today, they all thought I was just a spoiled second-generation heir. They thought I was using my father's name, Chen Tiandao, to put on a show. They didn't respect a title, they respected power. Now that I'd shown them mine, their doubts vanished like smoke. I looked down at the crowd. A small smile played on my lips. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Does anyone still doubt me? I asked. My voice was cold and steady, echoing across the training grounds. Is there anyone left who isn't convinced? No one spoke. Just minutes ago, they were shouting that my talent test was a lie. They had forced me to prove myself. Now that I had crushed them, they couldn't find a single reason to argue. My power didn't just match Chen Pingon's 9-star talent. It eclipsed it entirely. When I saw that no one dared to move, I turned my back on them. I walked slowly toward the elders, my hands tucked behind my back. Then, I spun around to face the entire assembly. Suddenly, I let my demonic energy explode. A chilling, pitch-black aura surged from my body. The sky above us began to shift colors. My supreme god-demon body carried a natural suppression over anyone on the path of demonic cultivation. Below me, the disciples and even the elders shivered. It wasn't just cold. It was a primal fear coming from the depths of their souls. As long as I am here, I declared, my voice booming through the air, the Chen family will flourish and never perish. As long as I am here, the Chen family will be invincible across the 3,000 realms. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto theirs. Tell me, are you willing to follow me? Are you ready to see the true peak of power? Thunder crashed the moment I finished speaking. The clear blue sky vanished, replaced by heavy, swirling black clouds. It felt like the world itself was reacting to my words. Gale force winds whipped around me, snapping my purple robes and tossing my long black hair across my face. I stood there in the center of the storm, looking like a god among mortals. This wasn't just a speech, it was a vow to the heavenly Tao. The elders and disciples were frozen. They stared at me with wide, trembling eyes. My words were incredibly arrogant. Even my father wouldn't dare claim we would be invincible across all realms. But looking at me, they didn't see a liar, they saw a leader. They felt a strange, magnetic confidence that made them believe every word I said was destiny. We are willing to follow the young patriarch, the elders shouted. "We follow the young patriarch," the disciples roared back. Their voices shook the entire arena. The atmosphere was electric. By the next day, the entire Chen estate was buzzing. The news of my return had spread like wildfire. Everyone was talking about how Chun Tiandao's son had emerged from 6 years of seclusion with 10-star talent. They told stories of how I had defeated the top geniuses of the younger generation without breaking a sweat. To them, my strength was becoming legendary. That night, I was sitting on my bed when I felt a presence outside. I opened my eyes and smiled. "Come in," I said softly. A small figure walked through the door. It was Qin Pingan. He was a 9-star talent, a rarity among billions of living beings. In the 3,000 realms, there were fewer than 1,000 people with his potential. If he didn't die young, he was guaranteed to become a powerhouse, a saint who could rule an entire region. He was the future of the clan, or he would have been, if I hadn't shown up. Pingan walked toward me with visible hesitation. He looked at me with deep reverence. He knew better than anyone how wide the gap between us was. At our age, he was already at the peak of the spirit concentration realm, just a step away from the void-breaking realm. But standing in front of me, he told me later that he felt like a single grain of sand facing a vast ocean. He knew I hadn't even used a fraction of my real power during our fight. If I had gone all out, he wouldn't have lasted a single second. "Greetings, young patriarch," Pingan said, bowing deeply. I smiled and stood up, walking over to help him up. "No need for such formalities," I said kindly. "I watched you fight today. Your techniques are a bit raw, and you lack experience, but for your age, you're impressive. With your 9-star talent, your cultivation will only get faster." I wasn't just being nice, he really was a genius. But Pingan didn't look proud. He looked humbled. "I don't deserve such praise," he replied quietly. "The young patriarch's talent is far beyond mine. I can't even see your shadow. The Chen family's future can exist without me, but it cannot exist without you." He spoke with a maturity beyond his years. Having lost his parents early, he saw the world clearly. He understood that regardless of his own talent, I was the one who would truly move the world. I was the heir, the son of the strongest man in the realm, and a monster of talent in my own right. I looked at him and knew I had found someone worth keeping by my side. I knew right then that I hadn't misjudged him. In the Chen family, anyone could be replaced, but I, Chen Yin, was the exception. I was the one who would lead our clan to eternal glory. I looked at Qin Pingan, a slight smile tugging at the corners of my mouth, and reached out to pat his shoulder. I was satisfied. It wasn't just his 9-star cultivation talent or his combat instincts that impressed me. It was his brain. At his age, to have such clarity of thought and the wisdom to hide his true edge was rare. This kid was going to go far. "The young patriarch overpraises me," Pingan said, quickly cupping his hands in respect. I didn't push the compliment. Instead, I changed the subject and looked him in the eye. "Do you know why I called you here today?" He froze for a second. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He probably had a guess, but he played it safe. He shook his head slowly. "Pingan does not know." I smiled. "Follow me. I will lead you to the peak of the 3,000 realms. I might even help you shatter the void and become a great emperor." The room went silent. Great emperor was a word buried under the dust of history. It had been countless years since a single great emperor had appeared in the 3,000 realms. That title meant immortality. It meant being truly invincible. No one could hear those words and stay calm. Even Pingan's breathing became heavy and ragged. If anyone else had said it, he wouldn't have believed them. But I had the talent, the background, and the power. Still, despite my blunt recruitment, he hesitated. He was a genius, and geniuses don't like being under someone else's thumb. If he followed me, he'd have to obey my every command. He cleared his throat, his voice steady but cautious. "Pingan was born a Chun, and I will die a Chun. I am willing to give my life for the family." I laughed internally. That was a clever answer. He didn't say he would die for me. He said he would die for the family. He was tying his loyalty to the clan, not to me personally. He was keeping his options open. I liked him even more for it. My past life taught me that talent gets you through the door, but character and brains keep you alive. "I see," I said, showing no frustration. I reached into my spatial ring and pulled out a scroll. It was deep green and pulsed with a thick, ancient spiritual aura. In our world, most techniques are written in books. Only ancient, primordial arts are recorded on scrolls like this. If word got out that an ancient manual had appeared, people would kill for it. I noticed you're still practicing the Chun family's basic entry-level technique, I said casually. The Chuyuan art is only a 4-star technique. It's fine for commoners, but for a 9-star talent like you, it's a waste of time. Even if the elders notice you, the best they'll give you is an 8-star art. I looked at the scroll in my hand. This is a 9-star technique called the Profound Flame Demon Art. It's not from the family library, so you don't have to worry about the elders' rules. I handed it toward him, watching his face. Pingon looked like he had been struck by lightning. A 9-star technique? These weren't just common goods. Even in a top-tier power like the Chun family, 9-star techniques were legendary. They were guarded like the crown jewels. If this hit the market, the top powers of the 10 upper realms would go to war just to catch a glimpse of it. His breathing was so loud I could hear it. He knew that as a branch family disciple, he'd never touch something like this unless he saved the entire clan. The difference between an 8-star and a 9-star art was like the difference between a puddle and the ocean. Pingon stared at the scroll, his hands trembling. Then, he gritted his teeth and pulled back. Young Patriarch, this is too precious. I cannot accept it. He knew there was no such thing as a free lunch. Usually, free was the most expensive price of all. My smile widened. This kid was incredible. To face that kind of temptation and still have the mental strength to say no? Most people would have snatched it and run. I didn't give him a choice. I stepped forward and shoved the scroll into his hands. I already have my own path, I told him firmly. This art is useless to me. You are a disciple of my Chin family. Whether you choose to follow me or not, I'm giving this to you because you represent our family's strength. Take it. I patted his shoulder again. We shared the same blood. If he got stronger, the Chun family got stronger. If the family rose, I rose. It was that simple. Pingon's eyes turned red. He clutched the green scroll, his chest heaving with emotion. Giving away a 9-star technique like it was a piece of candy. He had never seen such boldness. He took a deep breath, looking at me with a new kind of reverence. He realized then that regardless of my motives, I was a man destined for greatness. In that case, Pingon said, his voice thick with emotion, I would be honored to accept. Thank you, young patriarch. He took a step back and dropped to one knee, cupping his hands. For a cultivator, kneeling was a massive gesture. We only kneel to the heavens, the earth, or our parents. But in that moment, he didn't hesitate. To him, this technique was as good as giving him a second life. I watched him, knowing I had just secured a general who would help me burn down the world. I smiled. I reached out and gently helped Chin Pingon to his feet. He didn't say another word, but I could feel the shift in the air. The deal was done. Now, I just had to wait a few days to see if he would officially pledge his soul to me. Even if he didn't, I hadn't lost anything. He was a disciple of the Chin family, not an enemy. Our interests were aligned. I had given him the ultimate gift, and I knew he would feel the weight of that debt every time he drew his sword. From now on, he would look to me as his leader. It was a win-win. Young patriarch, it's getting late, Pingon said softly. I won't disturb your rest any longer. I'll take my leave. We exchanged a few more casual words before he bowed and walked out. I didn't stop him. I just nodded and watched him go. Outside the door, Pingon stopped. He looked down at the dark green scroll in his hands, then turned back to look at my closed door. He stood there for a long time, lost in thought. After a few silent breaths, his gaze sharpened. He had made his decision. Such status, such courage, such talent. Pingon whispered to the empty hallway. The young patriarch is truly one of a kind. With him leading us, the Chin family will soar to the heavens. He let out a long, heavy breath, gripped the scroll tight, and walked toward his quarters with a new purpose in his step. Inside my room, I turned my attention back to the phoenix egg. I sat beside it and began circulating my demonic energy, gently nourishing the shell. This egg had been with me since the moment I was born. For years, I had fed it my own essence day and night. It had grown significantly over time, its aura becoming more vibrant and restless. I smiled. I could feel it. The life inside was pulsing, stronger than ever. It wouldn't be long now before the shell cracked and a miracle was born. Time moved fast after that. News of my return spread through the Chen family like wildfire. My father, Chen Tiandao, was basically a god in their eyes. He had single-handedly dragged the Chen family from being a second-rate power to becoming one of the top forces in the 3,000 realms. His reputation was untouchable. Naturally, as his only son, my appearance caused a massive stir. But the ripples didn't stop at our borders. Across the 3,000 realms, powerful eyes were watching. For our enemies, my existence was a nightmare. Chen Tiandao was already a mountain they couldn't climb. If his son turned out to be just as much of a monster, they would never have a chance to rise again. Deep within the territory of the Crimson Flame Divine Dynasty, in their imperial capital, a conversation was happening in the shadows. So, the son Chen Tiandao hid for 6 years has finally appeared. An old, raspy voice echoed through a massive, dark palace. The voice was thick with suppressed rage. The speaker was an ancient man with snow-white hair and a face lined with centuries of age. He wore purple robes and lay lazily across a golden dragon throne. Standing before him was a younger man in a yellow dragon robe, embroidered with 5-clawed golden dragons that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. This was Wang Tong, the current emperor of the Crimson Flame Divine Dynasty. Despite his status, he stood with his head bowed in total submission. Replying to the ancestor, Wang Tong said respectfully, "Yesterday, Chun Yin returned to the Qin family. He took the talent test. They say his talent exceeded 9 stars. It caused quite a shock. Wang Ting didn't dare show even a hint of disrespect. He might be the emperor, but the old man on the throne was the true foundation of their empire. He was a saint king." In the 3,000 realms, experts were as common as grains of sand, but saint kings were legends. One man could wipe out an entire realm with a wave of his hand. It was only because of this ancestor that the Crimson Flame Divine Dynasty still existed. Without him, they would have been swallowed by my father's 9 heavens demon realm years ago. The ancestor's eyes flickered with a murderous light. He let out a cold snort that seemed to freeze the very air in the hall. "Damn that Chen Tiandao," the old man hissed. "If not for him, my Crimson Flame Dynasty wouldn't be reduced to this. Hundreds of years ago, they were one of the 10 greatest powers in the world. They had hundreds of thousands of years of history and enough strength to make the world tremble. But everything changed because of one man. Back then, the Qin family's realm was just a mid-tier territory neighboring the Crimson Flame lands. The dynasty didn't think much of them. They thought they could crush the Qin family like an ant if they just put in a little effort. A war broke out, and everyone expected the Crimson Flame Dynasty to win a landslide victory. Instead, the world got a slap in the face. The dynasty lost. On that day, a young man in black robes appeared. With a single sword, he slaughtered the dynasty's elite army. He killed their great marshal in 3 strikes. He marched into the imperial capital alone, challenging an entire nation. Not a single person could stop him. When the dynasty's ancestors came out to fight him together, he cut 3 of them down on the spot. Only this one old man survived, fleeing like a dog and spending 100 years hiding in the shadows just to recover his strength. That man in the black robes was my father. The ancestor stared into the darkness, his eyes burning with a hatred that had simmered for centuries. He hated my father more than anything in existence. And now, he had a new target. Me. If it weren't for me and my father, the Crimson Flame Dynasty wouldn't be rotting in this hellhole. The old man, Wang Zhun, narrowed his eyes. A cold, predatory light flickered in his gaze as he spoke, his voice slow and deliberate. 100 years ago, Chen Tiandao ruined us, he hissed. He dragged our dynasty into the dirt. If his son is allowed to grow up, the Crimson Flame Dynasty won't just be weak. We'll be extinct. It'll happen in the blink of an eye. He wasn't exaggerating. One man, my father, had already turned their glorious empire into a graveyard. If I grew up to be anything like him, they were finished. Wang Zhen couldn't accept that. He wouldn't. Standing beside him, Wang Tong, the current ruler, started to tremble. He had seen my father's power firsthand. The mere mention of the name Chen Tiandao sent a shiver down his spine. "Ancestor," he stammered, his voice thin with fear. "What should we do? If that boy reaches his potential, we're dead men walking." Wang Zhen didn't panic. Instead, The corners of his mouth curled into a chilling smile. "I've been laying the groundwork for 100 years," he whispered. "I've been waiting for this exact moment. Qin Tiandao made me feel the pain of losing a son. Today, I'm going to make him feel that same agony." The history was bloody. The great marshal my father killed with 3 strikes a century ago? That was Wang Zhen's son. He was the pride of the dynasty, their greatest hope, and my father had snuffed him out like a candle. Wang Zhen had been nursing that grudge for over 300 years. Wang Teng's face went pale. "Ancestor, that's his only son. If anything happens to Chun Yan, my God, you know what Qin Tiandao is like. He'll bury the entire Crimson Flame dynasty with the boy. He'll set the 3,000 realms on fire." The thought of my father's wrath was enough to make anyone lose their mind. If I died, the fallout wouldn't just be a war. It would be an apocalypse. Wang Zhen just laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "Relax. I started planting spies in the 9 Heavens demon realm a century ago. My agents are ghosts. Their tracks are covered so deeply that no one will ever link this back to us." Wang Teng exhaled, trying to calm his racing heart, but the knot in his stomach wouldn't loosen. He knew my father was a complete lunatic when provoked. If even a shadow of a doubt pointed their way, they were as good as dust. Wang Teng wasn't a coward by nature. You don't become an emperor by being weak. He was a peak supreme realm expert, just a hair's breadth away from becoming a sovereign. But he could never forget that day 300 years ago. He had watched my father, a young man no older than himself, dismantle their entire empire alone. The capital had turned into a river of blood. Great masters fell like autumn leaves. 3 of their 4 ancestors were slaughtered. Wang Teng hadn't even been strong enough to face my father back then. A single stray shockwave from my father's sword had nearly shattered his soul. 90% of their elites died in a single afternoon. That was the only reason Wang Teng even got to sit on the throne. There was no one else left to take it. In front of my father, Wang Teng didn't even have the courage to draw his blade. Wang Zhen glanced at him, his eyes full of contempt. He looked down on Wang Teng for being so shaken. "Enough," the old man snapped. "I have everything under control. Get out." Wang Teng knew he couldn't change the old man's mind. In this dynasty, the ancestor's word was law. He bowed deeply, sighed, and walked out of the hall, his heart heavy with dread. Wang Zhen stared out at the horizon, his eyes burning with a murderous light. "Qin Tiandao," he muttered to the empty room. "It's time you learn what it feels like to lose everything." Meanwhile, back at the Chun family estate in the 9 Heavens demon realm, I was oblivious to the conspiracy. I had been spending all my time in my small courtyard. Aside from the occasional chat with my mother, I spent every waking hour cultivating. My talent was legendary, sure, but I knew that talent meant nothing without soul-crushing hard work. My father had hammered that lesson into me since I could walk. Suddenly, a violent surge of spiritual energy snapped me out of my meditation. At first, it was just a ripple, like a stone dropped in a pond. But within seconds, the air began to vibrate with raw power. A massive vortex of energy formed in the corner of my room, swirling frantically toward a single point. I looked over, my eyes widening. It was the phoenix egg. The egg seemed to have come alive. It was greedily drinking in the spiritual energy, pulling everything from the surroundings like a starving predator. I stood up, watching the golden shell pulse with light. I'd lived with this egg for 6 years, and it had never done anything like this. "Is this little guy finally waking up?" I whispered. I knew this was the child of the Phoenix Queen, but the sheer intensity of the energy was starting to worry me. Something big was about to happen. The egg had been with me for 6 years, and it chose this moment to finally wake up. Just as the thought crossed my mind, the sky outside my window turned pitch black. Thick, heavy clouds swirled over the estate, blotting out the sun. Lightning crackled within the darkness, gathering strength like a predator waiting to strike. I knew exactly what was happening. When something truly powerful is born into this world, the heavens try to strike it down. This little guy was the child of the Phoenix Queen. But more than that, he had spent years absorbing my supreme god-demon energy. His talent had already surpassed his mother's. The 3-foot-tall egg began to crack. It started as a tiny fracture, then spread inch by inch. To any cultivator, a single shard of this shell would be worth a kingdom. Suddenly, a small head poked out, glancing around with curious eyes. The head was a brilliant reddish gold, radiating a holy, divine aura. He looked like a god descending to the mortal plane. But then, he stepped fully out of the shell. His wings were pitch black. They oozed a dark, malevolent energy that felt cold to the touch. These two clashing powers, holy and demonic, should have destroyed each other. Instead, they flowed together in perfect harmony. The little guy wobbled toward me. The moment our eyes met, I felt a shift in the air. It was like a biological switch flipped inside him. He didn't see me as a stranger. He saw me as his kin. He let out a happy chirp and started to run toward me. But the heavens weren't finished. A massive bolt of lightning, as thick as a man's arm, tore through the roof. It slammed directly into the little phoenix with a deafening roar. I didn't move. I wanted to see what he was made of. The smoke cleared, and the little guy was standing there, completely unscathed. Between his royal bloodline and my god-demon energy, a little lightning wasn't enough to hurt him. But it did make him angry. His eyes shifted, turning a deep, bloody red. He let out a piercing cry that seemed to shake the very foundations of the world. With a sudden snap of his black wings, he shot upward. He flew right through the hole in the roof, charging straight into the heart of the storm. I couldn't help but smirk. This little guy had a serious temper. I didn't feel a hint of worry. With his bloodline and me standing guard, nothing in this world could touch him. I flickered out of the room, appearing on the roof to watch the show. The commotion had alerted everyone. My uncle, Chen Tianin, and the clan elders came rushing toward my courtyard at breakneck speeds. They thought I was under attack. My uncle's face was pale as he landed near me. "Nian, what happened? Are you hurt?" I felt a warmth in my chest seeing how much they cared. I gave him a calm smile. "Relax, uncle. I'm fine. It's just the little guy making an entrance." They followed my gaze up to the sky. They all froze. They knew about the phoenix egg I'd been keeping, but they weren't prepared for the sight of a golden and black bird tearing through tribulation clouds. That bloodline power, the first elder whispered, his voice trembling. He had met the Phoenix Queen before. He knew her strength. But this baby phoenix felt even more oppressive. My uncle gasped, his eyes wide with realization. Is it possible? Has he reached the level of the nine-colored phoenix? In our world, the nine-colored phoenix was a creature of myth. They were the ancestors of the Phoenix clan. For them, reaching the Saint King realm was as easy as drinking water. They were the only ones with a shot at reaching the legendary Emperor stage. The elders looked at the bird with hungry, hopeful eyes. A beast like that could protect the Chun family for 10,000 years. I didn't correct them, but I knew better. This little guy was even more than a nine-colored phoenix. My god-demon energy was unlike anything in the 3,000 realms. He had been marinating in it for years. His potential didn't just match the ancestors, it blew them out of the water. Far away, in the Phoenix realm, the queen suddenly snapped her eyes open. She felt the bloodline connection flare like a sun in her mind. Her breath hitched. She could feel the sheer intensity of her child's power from across the realms. "It's stronger than the first ancestor," she whispered to the empty hall. Unbelievable. She realized then that her gamble had paid off. Leaving her child with me was the best decision she had ever made. She didn't waste a second. She summoned her subordinates, her voice booming with authority. "Go to the treasury. Pick out 10 of our greatest artifacts. Then, select 100 of our elite warriors. We are sending them all to the Chun family as a gift for the young master." She smiled, looking toward the horizon. The rise of the Phoenix clan had finally begun, and it was all thanks to my son. The Phoenix clan in the Phoenix realm was small in number, but every member was a powerhouse. Their bloodline was their pride. These royal warriors had never served as guards for outsiders. They were noble, arrogant, and looked down on the world. Yet, the queen had just ordered 100 of them to serve as my son's personal security. If this news got out, it would send shockwaves through all 3,000 realms. My elders were stunned, but nobody dared to question Feng Jiahuang. They simply nodded in silent obedience. Back at the Qin family estate, the situation was just as intense. Lightning crackled across the sky, but to a top-tier beast like the little phoenix, it was nothing. The bolts didn't cause him pain. They were just tools to temper his body. With a sharp cry, the bird soared through the electrical storm, treating the deadly energy like a playground. Suddenly, the little phoenix dove. He landed right next to Chun Yin, his eyes full of affection. The fierce creature who had just dominated the sky now acted like a needy baby in front of my son. He let out a soft chirp. Chun Yin smiled. You want me to ride on your back? The phoenix chirped again, confirming it. My son didn't hesitate. He shifted his weight and settled onto the phoenix's broad shoulders. With a triumphant cry, the bird took off. Even though he was a newborn, his speed was terrifying. He moved as fast as a human cultivator in the supreme realm. The sound barrier shattered, and the wind howled past Chun Yin's ears. It was fast, unbelievably fast. Below them, the disciples of the Chun family watched in awe. A phoenix, a creature that belonged in the legendary Phoenix realm, was flying over our home. The Phoenix realm was one of the 6 great realms, and its foundation was even deeper than our own 9 heavens demon realm. Look, someone is on the phoenix, someone in the crowd screamed. Every head turned. They saw a figure, small and young, sitting atop the divine beast. The crowd went silent. People were shaking. Who would dare to keep a phoenix as a pet? Weren't they afraid of being hunted down by the Phoenix clan? In the history of the 3,000 realms, almost no one had the guts to tame one of these birds. Among the disciples, Chun Pingon stared at the sky, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had met my son before. He recognized him instantly. He knew how rare phoenixes were and how aggressive their clan could be. To tame one was essentially a death sentence. Yet Chun Yin had done it. It was impossible. Chun Pingon tightened his fists. He realized then that the young master was truly on another level. He remembered the night Chun Yin had given him a 9-star cultivation technique without blinking an eye. Now, he had a phoenix as a mount. It felt like my son had an endless supply of hidden trump cards. Chun Pingon's resolve hardened. He wasn't a fool. Even though he had a 9-star talent, one of the best in the realms, he saw the massive gap between them. Chun Yin was the peak. Compared to him, everyone else was just an ant. Unaware of the chaos he was causing below, the little phoenix circled the sky a few more times before landing smoothly in the courtyard. When they touched down, my elders froze. They looked at the bird and then at each other, their faces pale with shock. The newborn phoenix had reached the extraordinary realm the moment he was born. Chun Yin had trained for 6 years to reach the peak of the Wuxiang realm, but this little guy had surpassed him in seconds. The power of that bloodline was terrifying. The elders quickly snapped out of it and rushed over, their faces beaming with joy. "Congratulations, young master," they shouted. "With a companion like this, your power is unmatched. The rise of the Chun family is inevitable." Their praise wasn't just flattery, they meant every word. The more they saw of Chun Yin, the more they feared and respected him. His talent, his luck, his opportunities, it was all on a level they couldn't have imagined in their youth. There was no jealousy, only pride. They knew that as Chun Yin rose, they would rise with him. Chun Tianyin laughed loudly and slapped Chun Yin on the shoulder. "Good job, nephew." Chun Yin smiled at the praise, but didn't let it go to his head. He reached out and stroked the phoenix's head. He could feel the deep bond between them. "You just hit the world, little guy. How about I give you a name?" The phoenix nodded eagerly, acting just like a child. Chun Yin rubbed his chin, thinking for a moment. "How about Enihong?" The moment the name was spoken, the phoenix went wild. He let out a cry that echoed through the entire Chun estate. He clearly loved it. Chun Yin smiled and scratched Enihong's neck. "Enihong it is, then." The bird chirped again and leaned his head against Chun Yin, rubbing against him to show his love. To Enihong, Chun Yin was the most important person in the world. He saw my son as his parent. More than that, he was addicted to my son's aura. The god-demon energy was like a magnet for any magical beast. As night fell, the Chun family remained buzzing with excitement. Ever since Chun Yin had come out of seclusion, the estate hadn't been quiet for a single second. Rumors were flying everywhere. They said the young master's talent wasn't just 9 stars, but a legendary 10 stars. They talked about his bottomless strength and, of course, his new mount. In a world where the Phoenix realm was an ancient, terrifying power, taming one of their own was seen as a direct provocation. Most people wouldn't have the courage to even think about it. But Chun Yin didn't just think about it, he did it. And he did it with style. What the rest of the world didn't realize was that the phoenix my son had just tamed wasn't just any bird. He was the direct offspring of the ruler of the phoenix realm. Later that night, a soft rhythmic knocking echoed from outside Chun Yin's room. My son's lips curled into a slight smirk. He knew who it was. "Come in," he said quietly. The door creaked open, and Chun Pingon stepped inside. He saw my son sitting cross-legged on the bed and immediately bowed. His eyes were filled with more than just respect. There was a deep sense of awe. It wasn't just because of Chun Yin's background or power anymore. It was about who he was as a person. In all his years, Chun Pingon had never admired anyone this much. "Pingon greets the young master," he said, his voice trembling slightly. He kept his eyes low, not daring to look my son in the face. Chun Yin smiled. "Pingon, what brings you here so late?" He already had a good guess why the boy was there, but he didn't say it. He just watched him with a knowing look. Chun Pingon lifted his head, then suddenly dropped to both knees, hitting the floor hard. "In the entire Chun family, there are only two people I truly admire," Pingon said, his voice firm. "One is the Lord, who led our clan to glory. The other is you, young master. Your talent is unmatched. If you'll have me, I want to follow you. From this day on, your word is my command." Before Chun Yin could respond, Pingon pulled out a long blade. Without hesitating, he sliced a deep gash across his own palm. Blood began to pour out instantly. "I, Chun Pingon, swear to follow the young master for the rest of my life. If I ever betray this oath, let the heavens strike me down." The air in the room shifted. This wasn't just a dramatic gesture. In the 3,000 realms, the heavenly Tao is real. A blood oath is a binding contract with the universe itself. If you break it, you die? Chun Yin was actually a bit stunned. He knew the boy was coming to join him, but he didn't expect him to be this decisive. To swear a blood oath at only 6 years old showed incredible character. He was smart, driven, and bold. This was exactly the kind of follower my son needed. Chun Yin stood up from the bed and walked over to Pingon, gently pulling him to his feet. He brushed his hand over the boy's bleeding palm. A faint trail of black, demonic energy flickered around the wound. Pingon gasped. He felt a sudden wave of warmth, followed by a slight itch. When he looked down, the bleeding had stopped. The wound was gone. Not even a scar remained. He stared at his hand, completely baffled by my son's mysterious techniques. "Fine," Chun Yin said, his voice dripping with confidence. "From now on, you stay by my side. One day, you'll look back and realize this was the best decision you ever made." My son wasn't bragging. Between his system, our family status, and his memories of a past life, he was destined for the top. But he knew talent wasn't everything. In the 9 Heavens demon realm, there were plenty of geniuses. We had at least 17 people with 9-star talent in the family right now. But most geniuses end up as nothing more than a pile of dirt because they lack resources or the right connections. Pingon was from a side branch of the family. Without Chun Yin, he'd always be 10 steps behind everyone else. Pingon squeezed his fists tight, his eyes glowing with determination. "I won't let you down." Chun Yin reached into his storage and pulled out a dark, metallic ring. He handed it over with a smile. "Consider this a welcoming gift." Pingon froze. A spatial ring? These weren't exactly common. They were made from rare spirit stones and required incredibly complex craftsmanship. He let his consciousness drift into the ring to see what was inside, and he nearly stopped breathing. 300 cubic meters, he whispered. His throat went dry. Most people were lucky to find a ring with 5 cubic meters of space. His parents had been powerful warriors who died for the clan, and the most valuable thing they left him was a tiny 5 cubic meter ring. But my son had just handed him a massive 300-meter void like it was nothing. And it wasn't empty. It was packed with enough cultivation resources to make a king-level expert jealous. Pingon was just a kid at the peak of the spirit realm, barely touching the threshold of the void realm. Even with his mental toughness, his head was spinning. This was a fortune beyond his wildest dreams. But Chun Yin wasn't finished. Seeing the boy hesitate, he reached back into his storage and pulled out a long, wicked-looking blade. The sword was a deep, haunting crimson, looking as if it had been soaked in the blood of 1,000 enemies. This was the Blood Moon, a 7-star high-quality treasure my son had pulled from his system. It was incredibly sharp, but its real power was psychological. When drawn, the blade emitted a mental attack that could daze an opponent. In a high-level fight, a split second of distraction is the difference between life and death. Pingin's eyes turned bloodshot with excitement. He could feel the raw power vibrating off the steel. This 7-star blade is yours too, Chen Yin said calmly. Work hard. Don't let its edge grow dull. Pingon looked at the ring, then at the sword, his mind completely blank. A 7-star weapon? For a kid like him, this sword was worth more than his own life. He stood there in total shock, unable to believe his luck. Pingon finally snapped out of his trance. His hands trembled as he held the gifts. Young master, he stammered, his voice shaking. These 2 gifts, they are far too precious. I don't dare accept them. He wasn't lying. Even though he wanted them more than anything, the value of what I had just handed him was astronomical. These were treasures that could start wars. I just smiled. I reached out and patted his shoulder, keeping my tone light and casual. Pingon, 1,000 gold pieces are easy to find, but a loyal general is hard to come by. These treasures are great, sure, but in my eyes, they aren't worth a fraction of your value. Take them. Use them to cultivate. Don't embarrass me. Besides, I'll have plenty of use for you in the future. Pingon looked at me with raw, unfiltered intensity. To him, my words weren't just kindness, they were a revelation. There's an old saying, a man will die for the one who truly knows his heart. At that moment, I saw a surge of emotion hit him. His eyes grew damp. He took a sharp step back and then dropped to his knees, slamming them against the floor. Thank you for your favor, young master, he cried out. From this day on, my life belongs to you. If you say go east, I will never go west. He lowered his head and delivered a heavy kowtow. The sound of his forehead hitting the floor echoed in the quiet room. I knew his history. He was an orphan who had tasted the cold bitterness of the world from a young age. That kind of life makes a kid grow up fast. It makes them hide their true potential just to survive. For years, I was the only person who had ever treated him with genuine respect and generosity. First, a 9-star cultivation technique, now a spatial ring and a legendary blade. People called us the demon path. But being a demon doesn't mean you lack a code. It doesn't mean you're ungrateful. In fact, it's usually the so-called righteous sects that are full of backstabbing hypocrites. By kneeling like this, Pingon was staking his entire existence on me. If I told him to die right now, he wouldn't hesitate. Get up, I said softly. In our demon realm, we don't kneel to heaven or earth. Aside from your parents, no one is worth your knees. Pingon shook his head firmly. The young master's kindness is like being born again. I don't kneel to heaven or earth, but I will always kneel to my parents and to you. In his heart, I was now equal to the parents he lost. I watched him satisfied. This was exactly what I wanted. With Pingon's talent and iron will, he was going to be my most powerful weapon as I took control of the Qin family. It's late, I told him. Go back and rest. Yes, sir. Pingon rose, bowed deeply, and backed out of the room. Even as he walked away, clutching the ring and the blood moon blade, I could see his eyes burning with a new fire. Once he was gone, I sat back and cleared my mind. System, I thought. Show me my attributes. A screen shimmered into existence in my mind. Host * Chun Yin Cultivation * Peak Wuxiang Realm Techniques * 9 Revolutions God Demon Art 9-star. Nianhua Finger 9-star. World Ending Sword Technique 9-star. Lost Trace Phantom Step 9-star. Physique * Supreme God Demon Body Talent * Demon Path Blessing Abilities * Close at Hand. Word is Law Lottery Draws * 48. I didn't hesitate. Perform a super draw. The system's lottery was pure luck. Sometimes you got a 9-star God tier item. Other times, you ended up with something useless like silk sleeves or black stockings. But a super draw combined 10 regular pulls, drastically increasing the quality. It was almost impossible to get trash. A massive wheel spun frantically in my mind's eye. It blurred into a circle of light before slowing down and clicking into place. * Ding. Congratulations. You have obtained the 9-star Body Refining Art, God Elephant Overpowering Force, *. My heart skipped a beat. Then, Pure excitement flooded through me. I knew this technique. In my past life on Earth, I'd read about it. It was a legendary art created by a supreme sovereign. The core idea was insane. The human body is composed of 840 million particles. If you could wake up the power of a god elephant in every single one of those particles, you could tear the sky apart with your bare hands. You could roar and knock stars out of the firmament. If all 840 million particles awakened, you could crush planets and walk across the void of space like it was a paved road. I had everything: techniques, weapons, movements, but I lacked a true body-refining art. My physical strength was good, but compared to a dedicated body cultivator, I was still soft. In the 3,000 realms, body cultivators are a rare breed. They don't use chi. They just temper their flesh into bronze and iron until they are harder than 7-star weapons. The path is dying out because it's incredibly painful and difficult. Most people who try to dual cultivate chi and body refining end up failing at both. They run out of energy and end up mediocre in both fields. But I wasn't most people. I had the system. I had the endless resources of the Qin family. I had a gut feeling that if I wanted to truly transcend and reach the great emperor stage, I couldn't just rely on chi. I needed a body that could withstand the pressure of the universe. I focused my mind on the new technique. It was beautiful in its complexity. Every activated particle granted the strength of a giant elephant. It was a long road, but with my talent, I made progress fast. By the time the sun started to peek over the horizon, I had already entered the first stage. I awakened 20 particles. 20 out of 840 million wasn't much. I felt a slight increase in raw strength, nothing world-changing yet. But this was only one night. What happens when I hit 200? Or 2 million? The progression was clear. The giant elephant was just the beginning. It would evolve into the dragon elephant, then the primal elephant, and finally, the god elephant. At the god elephant stage, I would be a living weapon, a physical god. I looked out at the morning light, a smirk playing on my lips. The god elephant overpowering force was everything I hoped for. I was just getting started. I sat cross-legged on my bed and slowly opened my eyes. Suddenly, I felt it. A terrifying aura was swirling around the entire Qin family estate. It was heavy, powerful, and strangely familiar. I frowned. This energy, could it be? My eyes widened as realization hit me. A surge of joy flashed through my mind. I knew this scent. It was my second uncle, Qin Tianyin. The air was vibrating with an unstable energy, like a volcano right on the verge of eruption. There was a raw, violent power hidden within it. Was he about to break through? My heart raced. I had given him a 9-turn yellow apricot recently, but I didn't expect the effects to be this fast or this potent. That medicinal fruit was truly a treasure. Uncle Tianyin was already at the middle stage of the Saint Realm. If he broke through now, he'd reach the late stage. In the Saint Realm, every small step is a massive leap in power. It's the difference between clouds and mud. If he got stronger, the entire Qin family's foundation would grow even more unshakable. I didn't hesitate. I threw on my clothes and shoes and sprinted toward his courtyard. Greetings, young patriarch. The clan elders were already there. They had gathered early, sensing the change. When they saw me, they bowed deeply, their eyes filled with genuine respect. Not a single one of the 36 elders dared to have any stray thoughts about me anymore. They all knew my talent was monstrous. I nodded quickly. How is my uncle? The first elder, Qin Tianyin, stepped forward. He stroked his beard and smiled. Reporting to the young master, the second lord is at the critical moment of his breakthrough. With his talent, it shouldn't be a problem. I noticed a flicker of envy in the first elder's eyes. He had lived 3 times longer than my uncle and was currently at the peak of the Saint Realm. But reaching the legendary Saint King stage was nearly impossible for him. He knew his limits. Now, his junior was about to reach the late stage of the Saint Realm. At such a young age, Uncle Tianyin's future as a Saint King was almost guaranteed. How could the old man not be jealous? But he was a family man first. He knew that the stronger Tianyin became, the safer we all were. Up until now, my father, Qin Tiandao, had been carrying the entire family on his back. Even though my father was the strongest in the 3,000 realms, the family couldn't rely on just one man forever. The first elder looked at me, his hope renewed. He probably figured that if he couldn't reach the Saint King stage on his own, his best bet was to follow me. I didn't say much. I just stood there quietly, my eyes fixed on my uncle's room. The house was radiating a terrifying demonic chi. A massive vortex had formed with the room at its center, greedily swallowing every drop of energy in the area. It felt like 20% of the entire Chun family's demonic chi had been sucked dry in an instant. This was the hunger of a saint-level breakthrough. Suddenly, the sky changed. Thunder roared and lightning slashed through the clouds. A fierce wind kicked up, howling like a gale. Then, a roar erupted from the room. It was a sound wave so massive it made the ground tremble. Many disciples nearby staggered, their spirits shaken by the sheer force of the voice. I felt the pressure, too, but my supreme god-demon body kept me steady. The room began to vibrate violently. A pillar of pitch-black demonic chi shot upward, piercing the sky and blocking out the sun. It was like the world had plunged into eternal darkness. How dare the heavenly Tao try to block me? A massive figure soared into the air. It was Chen Tianyin. He looked up at the gathering tribulation clouds with pure disdain. To a demonic cultivator, cultivation is an act of defiance against the heavens. He never believed in fate. The only person he ever truly respected was his big brother, my father. Everyone else, the lords of other realms or the heads of the great sects, meant nothing to him. He gripped a massive black axe. This was his signature weapon, the sky-piercing battle axe, an 8-star treasure. "Break from me," he roared. His eyes were bloodshot, and his body was shrouded in a thick, murderous aura. He looked like a primordial demon god. Even the first elder gasped. He hadn't realized just how terrifying my uncle's raw power had become. That single strike carried a hint of death that made even a peak Saint Realm expert feel uneasy. With one downward swing, the axe split the chaotic sky wide open. A literal rift appeared in the clouds, and sunlight flooded back in, chasing away the darkness. The strike left a permanent scar on the atmosphere. As the darkness vanished, my uncle's aura stabilized. He landed slowly, a smirk on his face. He put his axe away and looked at the sky one last time. "Heavenly Tao? Just SOSO," he scoffed. The moment his feet hit the ground, the elders felt a crushing pressure. He hadn't fully retracted his new power yet, and it was enough to make their hearts tremble with fear. I stood my ground, my constitution shielding me from the weight of his presence. "Big nephew, your uncle did it," he shouted, laughing loudly. His eyes were bright with excitement. "From now on, I'll take you anywhere you want to go. We'll live like kings." He walked over, his gratitude toward me clear. He knew that without the 9-turn yellow apricot, this breakthrough would have taken decades of bitter cultivation. At this moment, if I asked him to die for me, he wouldn't blink. He clenched his fists, feeling the endless strength flowing through his veins. He had been trained by my father since he was a child. With his new cultivation and his hidden trump cards, he might not be able to defeat a Saint King yet, but he could certainly hold his own. He was arguably the strongest person below the Saint King stage now. I smiled at him. "Congratulations, Uncle. You're one step closer to becoming a Saint King." The gap between a saint and a Saint King was massive, but looking at him now, it didn't seem so far away anymore. Below the Saint King stage, everyone is just an ant. That saying is popular for a reason. For a human, reaching the Saint King realm means your lifespan explodes to tens of thousands of years. For ancient beasts like the Phoenix clan, it's even crazier. They can live for hundreds of thousands. My uncle, Chen Tianyao, had just broken through to the late stage of the Saint realm. He wasn't a Saint King yet, but the gap didn't feel like an impossible canyon anymore. He was beaming, his heart racing with a joy he couldn't hide. Before today, despite his talent, he knew he was leagues behind my father, Chen Tiandao. Reaching the Saint King stage felt like a pipe dream that would take centuries, if it happened at all. But now, he looked at me and realized everything had changed. He couldn't see through me. My own uncle, a powerful saint, couldn't fathom a single bit of my cultivation. Even my father had admitted I was a mystery he couldn't unravel. Yet, they never pried. They gave me total freedom and trust. Why? Because I was a Chun. As long as the family prospered, my secrets didn't matter. In this world, having no secrets is actually dangerous. If you don't have a hidden trump card or a stroke of heaven-defying luck, you won't survive long. My father understood this. He didn't care what I was hiding as long as I was his son. If I caused trouble or even poked a hole in the sky, he'd be there to fix it. That's the confidence of the top man in the demon path. Uncle laughed and patted my shoulder. We didn't need words. We understood each other perfectly. But our moment was cut short. A frantic manager named Chun Lai rushed into the hall. He bowed deeply to me, my uncle, and the elders. "Report," he shouted, his voice tight with urgency. "The saintess of the succubus sect is outside. She's begging for an audience with the young patriarch." The succubus sect. I felt the elders' eyes shift. In the nine heavens demon realm, our Chun family is the undisputed overlord. We rule billions of miles of territory, but we don't do it alone. We have the three sects, the one faction, and the 5 families under us. They pay tribute and provide soldiers whenever we go to war. The succubus sect is one of those 3 major sects. It's composed entirely of female cultivators who specialize in charm and top-tier illusions. They aren't weak, either. Their sect master is a saint. "It's not time for the annual tribute yet," Elder Chin Pingon noted. "If their saintess is here now, something big must have happened." I nodded. "Let's go see what she wants." We walked into the meeting hall. 2 women were waiting. One was older, maybe in her late 30s, with a face that was mature and refined but deathly pale. This was Jiang Ping, the 3rd elder of their sect and a peak king realm cultivator. She looked like she had just crawled out of a bloody war. She leaned toward the younger woman next to her, whispering urgently, "Saintess, are you really going to hand over our ancestral lands to the Qin family? Our heritage is older than theirs." She wasn't wrong. The succubus sect had deep roots, but the Qin family had my father. In just a few hundred years, he had unified the realm and turned us into one of the top 10 powers in the 3,000 realms. Meanwhile, the succubus sect had been decaying. They were losing talent and power, forced to become our subordinates just to survive. My father was a tyrant. He didn't tolerate dissent. You either served the Qin family or you were erased from the map. The younger woman, Shueluer, sighed. Her eyes were full of bitterness. "Elder Jiang, do you think I want this? If we don't do it, my master will die. Our entire 10,000-year legacy will be wiped out today." Just then, I walked in with the elders behind me. Shueluer stood up immediately. The moment her eyes met mine, she froze. I could see the shock in her expression. It wasn't just my status, it was my bloodline. The supreme god-demon body carries a natural suppression. To her, it felt like an ancient predator had entered the room. She felt a sudden, terrifying urge to submit to me, as if I could crush her with a single word. She was smart. She knew exactly who I was. "Disciple Shueluer greets the young patriarch," she said, bowing low. I didn't waste time. I walked to the main seat, sat down, and looked her over. "Why is the succubus sect here? Get straight to the point." Shueluer didn't hesitate. She clasped her hands, her eyes beginning to shimmer with tears. "Young patriarch, our great elder has betrayed us. She conspired with a dozen other elders and outside forces to stage a coup. They're trying to steal my master's position as sect master. I begged the Qin family to restore order." She looked pathetic and beautiful all at once. Her long, porcelain legs were visible beneath her robes, and her face was a perfect mix of innocence and lethal charm. As the saintess of the succubus sect, she was built to be a distraction. But as she wept, I knew this wasn't an act. Her sect was burning, and I was the only one who could put out the fire. Her beauty was the kind that could ruin empires. Most men would have been tripping over themselves to please her, but I wasn't most men. I frowned. A cold, sharp, killing intent flared out from my body, filling the room like a physical weight. "You think you can charm me?" I asked. My voice was flat, dripping with disdain. Shueluer flinched. A flicker of panic crossed her eyes, and she immediately dropped into a deep bow. Her hands trembled. She claimed it was her innate succubus body acting on its own, an uncontrollable slip of her power. She begged for my forgiveness. I knew she was lying. She saw a 6-year-old kid and thought I was an easy target. She figured I was inexperienced and that she could use her body to lead me by the nose. If she could wrap me around her finger, her sex crisis would be solved. She didn't realize my willpower was a fortress. Even without using illusions, her natural charm was enough to bring grown men to their knees, but it didn't even make my pulse quicken. Whether it was an accident or not, you know the truth, I said. I didn't want to waste time on her games. This coup is an internal matter for the succubus sect. My family doesn't interfere in petty squabbles. You should leave. My voice was icy. To me, a woman's beauty was nothing but a pink skull covered in flesh. It was irrelevant to the great Tao. The succubus sect was a subordinate power to the Qin family. It didn't matter to us who sat on the throne. Whether it was her master or the great elder, they would still have to pay us tribute. They would still have to follow our orders. Why should I get my hands dirty for no reason? Behind me, the elders and Qin Tianyin exchanged looks of pure pride. They didn't care about the sect one way or the other, but they loved my style. I was thinking about the family's interests. I was clear-headed. They didn't just need a powerful heir, they needed a leader with a brain. Shui Luer's face turned pale. She hadn't expected a 6-year-old to be this cold and calculating. She bit her lip, looking desperate. She looked like she was making a life-changing decision. Young patriarch, she whispered, her voice soft and trembling. If you help my master, I will follow you from this day forward. I will wash your clothes, cook your meals, and warm your bed. I will be your servant without complaint. Elder Jiang froze. He looked at her in total disbelief. This wasn't part of the plan. He begged her to stop, telling her she was the future of their sect and shouldn't throw herself away like this. But Shui Luer knew she had no other cards left to play. The only thing she had that could possibly interest the Qin family was herself. She was the most beautiful woman in the 9 heavens. Countless geniuses were her dogs, following her every move just for a glance. She was certain I couldn't refuse. I looked her up and down. I didn't look impressed. I looked annoyed. Wash clothes. Cook meals. I scoffed. Look at your hands. You've never worked a day in your life. You'd be useless to me. As for warming my bed, I spend my nights in cultivation. I don't sleep. I have no use for you. I didn't hide the disgust in my eyes. Shui Luer stood there, stunned. For the first time in her life, she was being rejected. She was the saintess. People lived and died for her smile. If anyone else had insulted her like this, she would have killed them. But this was me. She had to swallow her rage and force a smile. I can learn, she insisted. And I am a 9-star talent. I'm 16 and already in the transcendent realm. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Transcendent? Is that supposed to be strong? Before she could respond, I slammed my aura down on her. It was a crushing weight that stole the breath from her lungs. She gasped, her knees nearly buckling. I looked at her, my eyes mocking her. Transcendent. It's nothing. Shui Luer was drowning in fear. This aura, it was coming from a 6-year-old. It was terrifying. It felt like the power of someone at the peak of the non-phase realm. In this world, the path of cultivation is long, from Qi refining to the Saint King realm. She had hit the non-phase peak at 14 and thought she was a genius. But I was 6. It wasn't just the level of power. It was the feeling behind it. She felt a cold, sharp scent of death. She realized that if I wanted to, I could kill her right where she stood. I could jump levels and end her life before she could even blink. She stared at me like I was a monster. She had grown up hearing stories about my father, Qin Tiandao, the ruler of the 9 heavens. He was a man who struck fear into the heart of every demon cultivator. But as she looked at me, she realized I was even more terrifying than he was. Shui Luer swallowed hard, her confidence completely shattered. I stared at Shui Luer, a playful but cold smile tugging at my lips. She didn't know what to say. 9-star talent, I mused, looking her up and down. A succubus physique base. Not bad. It's a shame, really. Following the succubus sect is a waste of your potential. It was the truth. Her talent was high, but her sect was poor. Their resources were limited, and their best technique was only an 8-star skill, and a broken one at that. In reality, it functioned like a 7-star skill. Under such mediocre guidance, her gifts were being squandered. Shui Luer lowered her head. She bit her lip, her mind racing. But, I continued, my voice turning flat. This isn't enough to move me. If you don't have anything more valuable to offer, I think it's time for you two to leave. I gave her a faint smile, but my eyes remained like ice. I wasn't some pathetic dog who lost his mind just because a beautiful woman was standing in front of him. Sure, Yahello was stunning. Probably the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. But so what? Without reaching the peak of cultivation, everyone eventually ends up as a pile of white bones in the dirt. Beauty is just a passing cloud. If she didn't bring enough to the table, I wasn't helping. I didn't do favors for free. Yahello panicked. She hadn't expected a 6-year-old to be this difficult to negotiate with. She had already offered so much, and I hadn't even blinked. She clenched her fists, her knuckles turning white. "Master, ancestors, please forgive my betrayal," she whispered in her heart. She looked up and forced herself to meet my eyes. My pupils were radiant, glowing like twin suns. It was hard for her to even look at me. It felt like an act of disrespect against a natural-born emperor. But she pushed through the pressure. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Young clan leader, I have a great treasure to offer." "A great treasure?" I repeated. I let a hint of interest show, but kept my face calm. "It better not be a joke." Yahello flushed with shame and frustration, but she didn't dare snap back. She reached into her robes and carefully pulled out a stone key. "This key is the only way to open the ancestral ground of the succubus sect," she explained. I frowned. I didn't know the value of their ancestral land. I looked at the elders behind me, and they seemed just as confused. None of us knew what was hidden in there. Only Jiang Ping, the man traveling with her, looked like his heart was being ripped out as he watched her hold that key. "Our sect descended from a supreme demon sect 30,000 years ago," Yahello said quietly. 20,000 years ago, that sect fell and split into 3 branches. We are one of them. Our ancestral ground is the most guarded secret of our leaders. My master told me that within it lies a thunder pool. The moment those 2 words left her mouth, the room went silent. The elders, including my uncle Qintianin, widened their eyes in pure shock. I didn't quite catch the significance, so the great elder, Qintianin, leaned in to explain. A thunder pool is the literal origin of lightning in the world. They are incredibly rare. For any cultivator, they are a miracle. They boost your cultivation speed, and for body refining specialists, they are the ultimate training ground. More importantly, they can birth a heart of thunder. If you swallow that, you might comprehend thunder-type divine abilities. My eyes practically turned into gold coins. I didn't care much about the abilities. I had a system for that, but I cared deeply about the body refining. Just last night, I had started practicing the God Elephant overpowering strength technique. In one night, I had awakened the strength of 20 giant elephants. With a thunder pool, my progress would explode. I could already imagine myself treading through the stars and tearing planets apart with my bare hands. I stopped hesitating. I looked at Yahello again, and this time, my gaze was much warmer. "Well, why didn't you say so?" I laughed, sounding like the friendliest kid in the world. "With a treasure like that, we're practically family. And family should help each other out, right?" I grinned at her. "Don't worry, Miss Xue. I've always been known for my helpful nature and my love for justice. I'm taking this job." Yahello stared at me. The elders stared at me. Even Jiang Ping looked speechless. Helpful? Justice? Neither of those words belonged anywhere near me. I stood there with a bright, innocent smile, looking like the boy next door. But Yahello knew better. She knew I was a predator who wouldn't move an inch without seeing a profit. The moment the treasure appeared, I had flipped my personality like a mask. She was sad about losing her sect's ancestral land, but she had no choice. If her master died, the sect was gone anyway. She'd be hunted down by their traitorous great elder. Between 2 evils, she chose the one that kept her alive. "Thank you for your righteous assistance, young clan leader," she said quickly, afraid I'd change my mind. "I will be forever grateful." "No need to be polite," I said, my smile widening. "By the way, once this is over, you'll stay by my side as a maid. You can pour my tea and fetch my water." Yahello froze. "Wait, didn't you just reject me earlier?" Now I was taking the ancestral ground in her. I was stripping them of everything they had. She felt exhausted just trying to keep up with me. I wasn't a child, I was a fox. "Yes," she whispered, bowing her head in submission. Jiang Ping looked like he wanted to say something, but he stayed quiet. The deal was done. "Young clan leader, When do we leave? Right now, I said. I couldn't wait. I wanted that thunder pool. I wanted to see just how powerful my new technique could become. I turned to my uncle. Second uncle, are you free to take a trip with me? Qin Tianyin had just broken through to the late stage of the Saint Realm. He was itching for a fight to test his new power, and he'd do anything for his nephew. If my nephew asks, he said, slapping his chest with a confident grin, I'd go through fire and water. Don't worry. With me there, even the King of Heaven won't touch a hair on your head. He meant it. The second master of the Qin family was a name that made the 3,000 realms tremble. Xueluer let out a breath of relief. With him coming along, there was finally hope. When Qin Tianyin stepped forward, Xueluer's face instantly brightened with a look of pure relief. She knew my second uncle's reputation well. He was my father's only brother, a man who had been a lawless force of nature since childhood. His strength was terrifying. With him by my side, the great elder of the succubus sect wouldn't be able to stir up even a tiny ripple, let alone a storm. I caught her expression and smiled to myself. I had zero doubts about my uncle's power or his loyalty. Still, I wasn't taking any chances. In that case, let's bring 200 black guards along as well, I commanded. The black guards were my personal security detail, 500 elite warriors in total. People knew better than to underestimate them. To join this unit, you had to be a master at the transcendent realm at the very least. They were led by 5 commanders, each of whom had reached the king realm. A force like that could march through most territories in the 3,000 realms completely unopposed. And for me, they were just a fraction of my protection. As you wish, young clan leader, the elders said in unison, bowing their heads. Soon, a massive, pitch-black spirit ship rose from the Qin family grounds, piercing through the clouds. In this world, spirit ships were rare treasures. They were incredibly difficult to forge, often taking master blacksmiths years to complete a single vessel. Mine was special, a 7-star spirit treasure, custom-made for me by a family elder when I was born. It was fast, heavily armored, and one of the few of its kind in our entire clan. As we soared through the sky, the 200 black guards stood like statues along the inner deck. Xueluer watched the landscape blur past with a look of pure envy. Her sect had a few ships, but they were 4-star junk compared to this. Next to my ship, hers looked like broken rowboats. I walked up behind her, my footsteps silent. We'll be there in about 4 hours, I said softly. There's no need to worry. She spun around, startled, and immediately bowed when she saw it was me, with Jiang Ping trailing behind. Thank you, young clan leader. I nodded, looking her over. I think you have a lot of potential. She blinked, confused by the sudden compliment. I thank you. Follow me, I said, a mysterious smile playing on my lips. It will be the best decision you ever make in your life. I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there looking lost. She couldn't understand why I was so confident. To her, a 9-star talent was a genius, but she didn't realize that compared to me, a genius was just a firefly next to the moon. He certainly talks big, she muttered under her breath once I was out of earshot. 9-star talent is rare, but he acts like he's already conquered the world. Suddenly, the air around her turned ice cold. Qin Pingan, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward. His eyes were filled with a sudden, lethal intent. He was only 6 years old, but since I'd given him the 9-star mysterious flame demon technique and showered him with resources, he had bypassed the peak of the spirit realm and broken straight into the void realm. My master's talent is unmatched in the 3,000 realms, Pingan said, his voice flat and dangerous. He will reach the god realm. You are just a frog at the bottom of a well. How dare you look down on him? Xueluer's arrogance vanished. She felt the pressure radiating off the boy. A 6-year-old in the void realm? He was a monster. And this monster was serving me like a loyal shadow. Before she could speak, Pingan's blade cleared its scabbard. A flash of cold light cut through the air, and the space around them seemed to freeze. He lunged, his body moving like a streak of moonlight. Xueluer gasped. She was 2 major realms higher than him, but his speed was incredible. She blurred into motion, narrowly dodging the strike. A few strands of her hair drifted to the deck, severed by the passing blade. You brat. You tried to kill me, she hissed, her chest heaving with anger. If he weren't my person, she would have struck back instantly. Pingon didn't flinch. He sheathed his sword, his eyes still burning with murderous devotion. To him, I wasn't just a master. I was his sky, his faith, and his entire world. He didn't care about realm differences. If someone crossed me, he would try to cut them down even if it cost him his life. He is the moon, Pingon said coldly, turning his back on her. You are just dirt. Remember that. Xuelua watched him walk away, a genuine shiver running down her spine. She wasn't just afraid of the boy's talent. She was terrified of the loyalty I commanded. What kind of person was I to make a genius like that follow me so blindly? Her resistance to being my mate started to crumble, replaced by a growing, frantic curiosity. While they were reeling from the encounter, I was in my cabin, submerged in cultivation. I never wasted a second. Talent was a gift, but effort was a choice. Even with the best bloodline in the world, I knew that if I grew lazy, someone would eventually catch up. I hadn't slept a full night in years. I used meditation to replace rest. A soft knock came at the door. Young clan leader, the Blackguard commander whispered. The succubus sect is just ahead. I opened my eyes, the power within me settling into a calm hum. I stood up and pushed the door open. On the deck, Xuelua and Jiangping were standing near the railing, their faces pale and anxious as their home came into view. It was time to collect what was mine. Xuelua and Jiangping stood beside me, their knuckles white as they gripped the railing. Their anxiety was thick enough to taste. The betrayal of the Great Elder had happened almost overnight. When darkness fell, the succubus sect had transformed into a slaughterhouse. The Great Elder had conspired with 10 other elders and outside forces to seize power in a single bloody coup. If their master and a few loyalists hadn't fought to the death to create an opening, Xuelua and Jiangping would never have escaped. We're almost there, I said. Xuelua turned to me and gave a shaky nod. Suddenly, my uncle, Qin Tianyin, frowned. A look of pure disgust crossed his face. I noticed the shift in his mood immediately. Uncle, what is it? I asked. He narrowed his eyes and released his divine sense. As a Saint Realm expert, his mental reach was staggering. In an instant, his consciousness blanketed the entire succubus sect like an invisible net. After a moment, his scowl deepened. Inside this sect, I sense a presence that makes me very uncomfortable, he muttered. I blinked in surprise. Something that made Qin Tianyin uncomfortable? He didn't elaborate, mostly because the aura was flickering in and out of existence, making it hard to pin down. He shook his head, perhaps thinking he had sensed it wrong. Don't worry, nephew, he said with a cold snort. Your uncle is here. Even if the King of Heaven himself shows up, he won't touch a hair on your head. As he spoke, the air around us seemed to freeze. Qin Tianyin was at the late stage of the Saint Realm. He was already beginning to touch the very laws of reality. A simple grunt from him was enough to make the world tremble. I smiled and nodded, feeling the weight of his protection. Our spirit ship descended rapidly, piercing through the clouds and landing squarely in the center of the sect's plaza. Down below, the Great Elder, Luo Hongqiu, stood waiting. He watched the ship bearing the Qin family crest with cold, calculating eyes. He hadn't expected that slut Xuelua to actually succeed in bringing back reinforcements from the Qin family. It was a complication he hadn't fully prepared for. Great Elder, the Qin family is here, the second elder whispered, his voice trembling. What do we do? Everyone in the Nine Heavens demon realm knew the Qin family. They were the undisputed overlords, the top power of the demonic path. They were arrogant, unpredictable, and utterly dominant. The second elder still remembered a young man named Chen Tiandao, who had risen like a comet centuries ago. With a single casual strike, that man had cleaved a 10,000-year-old mountain in half. The fear of the Qin family was etched into their very souls. Luo Hongqiu sneered. So what if they're here? Don't forget, we have outside help too. That lord promised us that if we get the secret medicine from the ancestral grounds, he'll take us out of this realm. He even promised us a chance to break through to the Saint Realm. Luo Hongqiu had been stuck at the peak of the King Realm for years. The temptation of becoming a saint was too much to resist. The second elder's fear was instantly replaced by greed. To be a saint was to transcend mortality. Just follow my lead, Luo Hongqiu hissed. That lord's background is so powerful even the Qin family wouldn't dare to be too reckless. We get protection and a breakthrough. It's a win-win. The hatch of the spirit ship hissed open. Luo Hongqiu forced a fawning, oily smile onto his wrinkled face, looking like an old pimp greeting wealthy clients. We welcome the lords of the Qin family, he cried out, bowing low. His plan was simple, avoid conflict if possible. He didn't want to fight the Qin family unless he was backed into a corner. As I stepped out, Shui Luer followed close behind. When her eyes met Luo Hongqiu's, the air practically caught fire. Her calm vanished, replaced by a murderous rage so intense it made her shake. She had never wanted to kill someone so badly in her entire life. Luo Hongqiu ignored her. To him, she was a non-entity. If he could win over the Qin family representatives, she was already a dead woman. He looked past her, his eyes landing on me. He froze. Why had the Qin family sent a 6-year-old boy to handle this? But before he could process that, a massive, mountain-like figure stepped out behind me. Luo Hongqiu's face went pale. He looked like he had just swallowed a stone. As second master, he stammered. Everyone in the 3,000 realms knew Qin Tianyin. He was the only brother of the great demon lord, Qin Tiandao. He wasn't a man of mercy. He was a butcher who wiped out entire clans for fun. Luo Hongqiu had expected a random elder, not the second in command of the entire Qin Empire. The other elders of the succubus sect gasped, their blood running cold. Why was this god of slaughter here? Qin Tianyin stood silently behind me like a shadow. I looked at the old man. You're the great elder, Luo Hongqiu? Luo Hongqiu looked at me, then at the respectful way Qin Tianyin stood behind me. His brain scrambled to make sense of it. Who was more important than Qin Tianyin in the 9 heavens? Only one person. 6 years ago, a child had been born to Qin Tiandao, and the heavens themselves had changed color. But the boy had been kept hidden from the world ever since. The young leader asked you a question. Qin Tianyin growled, his voice like a thunderclap in the old man's ears. Luo Hongqiu snapped out of it, his knees nearly buckling. Yes, I am Luo Hongqiu, great elder of the succubus sect. I greet the young lord. His heart sank. If it had been a normal elder, he might have tried to kill them and flee with his mysterious benefactor. But this was Qin Tiandao's only son. If anything happened to this boy, Qin Tiandao would turn the entire universe into a graveyard. That man was a total lunatic, and a lunatic with that much power was a nightmare no one wanted to wake up to. The 3,000 realms would shake if they knew what was happening here. I saw the terror in Luo Hongqiu's eyes. He knew that if I captured him, death would be a mercy he wouldn't receive. My uncle Qin Tianyin was standing right there, and he wasn't known for his patience. Luo Hongqiu's mind was racing, his eyes darting back and forth as he searched for a way out. I didn't have time for his internal struggle. I let out a cold snort. Where is the sect master of the succubus sect? I didn't want to waste words on this old man. My reason for helping Shui Luer was simple. I wanted the succubus sect's thunder pool. As we got closer to the sect grounds, the colossal elephant power inside my body started to stir. It was an incredible feeling of excitement. It was more exhilarating than anything I had ever experienced. I needed that pool, and I needed it now. I wasn't going to let some old elder stand in my way. Luo Hongqiu looked at the second elder, his face pale. He was trapped. He tried one last desperate move. Young lord, he stammered. That woman Zhang Li has always been rebellious. I have long admired the Qin family. If you spare us, I will hand over the entire succubus sect to you with both hands. He was desperate. He hoped the sect's wealth would buy his life. This sect had hundreds of thousands of years of heritage. To most people, that kind of offer was impossible to refuse. Shui Luer's face turned red with rage. She watched him sell out her ancestors' legacy without a hint of shame. She looked like she wanted to kill him herself. I didn't care about his riches. My face remained like stone. Don't make me say it a third time, I whispered. Where is she? My voice wasn't loud, but it carried a chill that cut through the warm June air. Everyone around us shivered. It was a bone-chilling cold that seemed to freeze their very souls. Even Luo Hongqiu looked like he'd been struck by lightning. He realized I wasn't a child he could manipulate with shiny toys. He gritted his teeth and made his choice. Since it is like this, please, Young lord, second master, follow me. I glanced at my uncle. We shared a look, a silent understanding. Lead the way, I commanded. Luo Hongqiu and the second elder walked ahead, their shoulders slumped in defeat. Shui Luer and my uncle followed closely behind me. We headed toward the dungeon. It was a path Shui Luer knew well, a dark and damp route that led deep underground. We reached the entrance after a few minutes of tense silence. Young lord, Luo Hongqiu said, bowing low with a submissive look. Zhang Li is inside. Shui Luer's eyes lit up with hope. We were finally here.